Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise Podcast. It's time to remember this crap with Mike Donahue. Mike, how are you?
Feeling old, Andy, because earlier tonight, driving in my car after baseball practice, I heard the air-scratching stylings of Zach Zaidman inform me that Vladimir Guerrero has hit his 100th home run. And it feels like yesterday that I was heckling his father on his first week in the big leagues, opening day 1998. And so just adjusting to that.
So this is the for people who like to torture themselves. This is the long-awaited, remember this crap, of the 2004 Chicago Cubs. The last one in this series will be a much happier one. Although, albeit with a tragic ending, but it's a much happier, more positive. That'll be the 1984 Cubs. But for now, you get the 20th anniversary team and their exploits. But before we get to that, last week we did a Remember This Crap on the Bears and the 49ers, and we did the 1985 game where the Bears got their revenge from the previous NFC Championship game. And we were exposed for the first time that we could remember to a plucky CBS analyst named Wayne Walker, who I
learned so much about Wayne Walker.
Who we found out not only did he look like an enormous Jimmy Buffett. I'm enormous only in his football player size. He was not a rotund man.
Not a Matt Millen.
And that he had been an All-Pro he had been a Pro Bowl linebacker. I guess he'd made one All-Pro team with the Lions and their place kicker, and he was a terrible place kicker. He could make extra points, and that was it. He's made 40% of his field goals for his career. So that was funny. Yeah. We talked about Wayne, and this week I heard Al Michaels on the Jimmy Traina podcast, and he was just talking. Al's going to do the Amazon game, so he's on. He's chatting about the NFL season, what's going to be like to work for Amazon. And Jimmy asked him basically a question like, was there anybody you ever worked with that you thought didn't like? What Jimmy was angling for was somebody who dabbled in announcing, who had a lot of potential, but like went back to coaching or went into something else and didn't. And Al said, actually, he goes, I did work with a guy who exited the profession for a very strange reason. And I was intrigued as to what he was talking about. Al worked a couple of years for CBS.
In the late 70s, before he became an ABC stalwart.
He was there. Brent was doing games, and about the time Al left,
Brent was doing the studio show, right?
Well, Brent apparently was. He said at one point he and Brent were both doing games, and then eventually Brent went to do the NFL Today. And after Al left, a guy named, we know this because we listened to one of the games, Bob Costas, worked for CBS.
Bob Costas and Johnny Morris did a Bears game that we broke down last year. Look it up.
So Al told a story about being sent to New Orleans to be an emergency fill-in. There was some kind of travel problem, and they said, we don't even know who your analyst is going to be, but get there on Saturday, and we'll get somebody there, and you guys can work. And he said he's standing in this is not the Wayne Walker story yet. He said he's standing in the hotel lobby, and he looks over, and in the in the line next to him, also getting ready to check in, is Hank Stram. So he walks over and says, Coach Stram, this Al Michaels, I think I'm your partner this week. He said, yeah, we are. And he said him and Hank got to do a bunch of games together, and he really liked Hank. And he said, but also another game in New Orleans, Hank called him. They traditionally went to dinner on Saturday, and he's like, Al, I can't have dinner with you tonight. And Al's like, well, that's fine. What's up? And he's like, the owner of the Saints wants me to have dinner with him.
You're
and
a coach.
Al's like, well, they're going to offer you the coaching job. And Hank's like, oh, I don't know about that. And so at the game the next day, he's talking to Al, and he's like, do you think I have a future in this business? And Al's like, what do you mean? And he's like, as an analyst, do you think I'm any good at it? He's like, yeah, I think you're really good at it. He said, but you're a football coach. And if the Saints want you to coach them, you want to do it, go do it, because at some point you're going to not be a coach again, and you can just do this.
Yep.
And this is exactly what happened. He coached the Saints. The Saints were terrible, and he got fired. And then he came back, and he announced for the rest of his life.
He was somewhat of a national presence. We talk a lot about Summerall and Madden 1-2. There's Dick Enberg and Merlin Olsen, but on the radio, Joe Buck and Hank Stram were doing Super Bowls up until like even 25 years ago, I'm guessing. So
So anyway, Al told that story then to tell this other one. He said, so Hank goes back into coaching, and then he goes, I had kind of a rotating set of partners the next year, and he goes, I was supposed to do a game in, he goes, I got an assignment to go do a game in New England with the Patriots, and my analyst was supposed to be Wayne Walker, who I'd worked with a few times. He said, but then I got a call that Wayne had told CBS that him and his wife and the kids were going to Disneyland because they were originally supposed to do a Rams game, and they got switched to the game in Boston. And he said, we're going to Disneyland, and I'm going. So either you put me on the Rams game or I'm done. No. And they said, well, you're done. And that's how Wayne's career ended. But Al threw in a little something else to kind of enlighten us. That was Wayne's new wife, who was some kind of an heiress. So Wayne had a shitload of money now.
Oh, it didn't matter.
And it's basically like, fuck you, we're going to Disneyland. But the irony of, we had never heard of Wayne Walker until last week, and then 3 days later, I hear another Wayne Walker story about how he told CBS to go fuck themselves because he's going to Disneyland.
From the mouth of Al Michaels. Well, you say I remember some of the facts when we had our Wayne Walker half hour last week, but he was a native Idahoan, played in Detroit, but then settled in San Fran, and became a West Coast guy. So when you're talking about New England, I'm like, he's probably not a fan of going across the country. And sure enough,
fuck that, I'm going to Disneyland. So he did.
That's great. That's like the whoever that band is, I forget. That's Wayne Walker.
All right, so So here's a great segue. Well, no, we could segue into announcers who quit. As we get to the end of this season, both Chip Carey and Steve Stone would jump out of the booth. Chip was in the final year of his contract.
Oh.
And was basically, the Cubs gave him a heads up that he wasn't going to be back. Steve quit because of I'm sure we'll get to this. He felt like the Cubs, Jim Hendry in particular, but the Cubs in general, were mean to Chip over some incidents that happened during the season. So,
and unlike Wayne Walker, Steve Stone was not married to a wealthy heiress, but he was, of course, he's been working for the 18 years since.
Steve's a confirmed bachelor.
That's right, and
I
think well enough off in 2004 where he could do that. That's true. That's a fun fact. Last season of Steve Stone as Cubs broadcaster.
So the 2004 season is one of the weirder seasons in Cubs history. It came off the heels of this unexpected great run that they had that culminated in them playing 3 games, 2 of them at Wrigley Field, with a chance to go to the World Series. And like we talked about it in the 03, the way that ended has kind of soured our memories on that, on what was an incredible season up until
in a way
in
which I don't feel about with 84, which was equally painful at the end, but doesn't seem to linger like 03 always has.
Yeah, I think honestly part of it is, I think 84 made 03 worse. Like I remember thinking when the Cubs were 1 win out of 3 games, like we've lived through this once, they're not going to fucking do it to us again. And then they did. And so we
pretty
hated
sure
them
we
even
talked
more
about it, right?
Because they did
we
that
talked
to us.
about right. The parallels, and we can bring it up again next week, but it is related to 04 because it's a continuation. But yeah, there's some eerie similarities between 84 and 03 in that they had 3 cracks to win 1 game. In 84 they had a pitcher that hadn't lost in 3 months, and 03 they had 2 pitchers that hadn't lost back to back in either 4 or 5 months. It's just it's out there and whatever. And I think you're right. It's having lived through 84 and then just having them having us go through it again almost identically put us in a weird frame of mind. I think in 04 probably was not quite as analogous to 1985.
Well,
because they were still good.
Yeah. But so we looked at the 03 team, and there were some holes on it, right? There wasn't really a first baseman. I mean, they had patched it together with Hesop Choi and Eric Karros, and then Randall
Karros pulled their fat out of the fire, and so did Simon. You're right.
And so what did Jim Hendry do? He went and he got Derrek Lee. So that hole is filled with a guy who won the pennant at Wrigley Field against us, but that was fine.
Yep.
They hadn't really addressed shortstop. Alex Gonzalez had been fine 03. He was going to start. If anything, they doubled up a position that was pretty solid with Mark Grudzelanek. They went and got Todd Walker.
Walker.
Now we got 2 second basemen.
Yeah. Yep.
The 5th starter had been Sean Estes, and now it was Greg Maddux.
Greggie's home. A much older Greg Maddux, but it's still effective. Certainly a hell of a number 5. So
center field had been, Corey Patterson had gotten off to that great start in 03, and then just about the time it all started to fall apart, he tore up his knee. Mm-hmm. And I've always been of the theory that led to a bad decision then going into 04, which was, Corey's getting better, but that's our center fielder.
You can forgive them for that because it was still a little incomplete. He did have one big season in 02 with like 600 at-bats and 170 strikeouts. But
my thought was if he doesn't get hurt in 03, he ends up with bad numbers.
Yes, and then
you look at it like we certainly can't count on him to be our everyday center fielder.
Well, it's a whole different butterfly flap between because if that happens, he stays healthy and falls off a table. They might, they only made the playoffs by a game. So
they never trade for they don't trade for Kenny Lofton, and they probably don't make the playoffs. And so maybe in a weird way that it tamps expectations down to the point where they're like, Corey's going to be good, we're going to be fine. Maybe he would have been the center fielder anyway.
Instead, their hedge was, wait till he comes back from this injury because he was just, with Patterson, they were always hoping more than they were actually being objective.
Now, it made perfect sense for the Cubs to try to keep Kenny, given that Moises Alou was injury-prone in left field. He had gotten through most of the season in 03, and the likelihood of him doing that again wasn't good. Corey was coming off a major knee injury, and he probably didn't want to try to play him every day. But there was a problem with that in that Kenny hated Sammy Sosa and didn't want to come back. I mean, if they had launched Sammy instead, he'd come back. But Kenny had basically said afterwards that, no, I did my time with Sammy. I was done with that shit.
That bad, huh?
Yep.
I mean, I know Sammy was not much of a teammate, right? He's always kind of pushing himself out front and center to get the fans adoration.
And who knows how much of that was, because I don't think the Cubs, it made sense for the Cubs to try to sign him. I don't know if they ever tried. And then when Kenny gets asked later, he could have been like, I wasn't coming back anyway, even though maybe he really did want to.
Right, just to get a chance to shit on Sammy, like I said, probably not the most likable teammate. I felt like Lofton was pretty old in 03, but he probably still played for a few years after.
He was 36. He played for the Yankees the next year. He played until 2000. He played until 2007.
Okay, yeah, he kept himself in shape.
Went back to Cleveland at the end. Played for Texas and Cleveland. His final year.
But you're right. First base, definite upgrade. Second base, like you said, was a redundancy, but hey, it doesn't hurt to have Todd Walker as opposed to, Ramon Martinez was probably still on the team, but Walker was certainly replacing somebody less worthy. And now you have Ramirez for a full season. You didn't have him until late, halfway through the year before. And, and then catcher was an upgrade at the time. Damian Miller depends on where you put the defense-offense calculus for catchers because Barrett was one of the best offensive catchers the Cubs had. But then you have to realize you're using the term catcher a little loosely because he was probably the worst defensive catcher. But I think at the time it was easy to convince yourself that it's another upgrade, certainly on offense. And God, with all that great pitching, how much can Barrett hurt them? Those guys.
And you had a capable backup.
Hank.
No, we had Gabor.
In 03.
In 04. Gabor was still around.
Oh, Hank didn't come along till 05. My bad. Okay.
The backup catchers on that team were Paul Bacco. There's got to be another. There's not enough games. And Mike DeFelice. But he only played 4 games. So
yeah,
those I think were in September.
So it's just the Barrett and Bacco show?
Yeah. Barrett caught 134 games. Bacco only played in 49.
Well,
he hit a whopping 203. That a boy, Gabor. And then obviously the other big hole they had was, and it was what cost them the pennant, was their bullpen. And they fixed it all up. they went out. They did amazing things. They went out and they got LaTroy Hawkins, who at the time was a great signing.
And they also picked up Mercker, which
Mercker.
seemed to be a savvy signing.
Yeah, it was get a lefty who isn't Mark Guthrie, and get a righty who isn't Dave Veers.
Right. The reality is that Dusty rode his starters like fucking thoroughbreds. And then the only three bullpen guys that he trusted down the stretch, and you might not actually blame him, was Borowski, Farnsworth, and Remlinger, I feel like. I don't know if anyone else you could ever really trust, and that's just too thin. Even when you're, burying your starters for 7-8 innings. Yeah. You need to have a little more depth in the bullpen. And that was proved because Guthrie gave up a tough homer in the playoffs. Farnsworth eventually shit the tub in the playoffs, but he had a good year. It didn't help either that Farnsworth was the Steve Traxel of relievers and would alternate good and bad years. Yeah. So he had a very good 01 and a very good 03, and then he was useless in what would turn out to be his final season of the Cubs. Maybe not. Maybe it was the next year. But
so LaTroy was paid like a closer at the time, but was going to be a setup guy. And that had been what he had done best in his career. And as it would turn out for the Cubs, when he wasn't closing, he was good. And when he was closing, he wasn't. And
there's that. And then another savvy pickup that Jim Henry made in the offseason was his first of several reclamation projects, and by far the most successful was the picking up the now cursed Ryan Dempster, who was coming off shoulder surgery, and stashed him on back then we called it the DL. Yeah. And that would sort of factor into the bullpen in a good way until it wasn't. But you're right. Hawkins was a significant free agent signing, but we already had Borowski, but I think everyone kind of knew that the turkey timer was going to pop up on Joe at some point. He pitched his heart out for 2 seasons. Miserable 02, and then 03 when everything was on the line, he just kept stepping up, and so I think Hawkins was actually signed not as a closer, like you said, he didn't pitch as well, but it was a hedge. It was insurance against Borowski getting hurt, as was Dempster being picked up. So as things would bear out, Borowski did get hurt and not finish the 04 season. Hence those other 2 guys.
I think the real tragedy of the Cubs bullpen was the fact that they let the guy who could have been their lefty closer and actually did get a save. They let him go. They let him go to the Red Sox. Right after he got the save. Do you remember Jimmy Anderson?
I do. I remember when we all congregated and ordered a pizza in his hotel room.
Yep.
When he won that game.
His final appearance as a Cub ever. In a 7-2 Cub win, Jimmy Anderson pitched the final 4 innings and got his only big league save. He gave up 5 hits and 2 runs.
Came up as a pirate, if I'm not mistaken.
And he came in and it was like, might as well just let Jimmy finish. And then it became my joke was that he's a big boy. I said, well, I'll send him a pizza. And so we figured out what hotel the Cubs were in, and I don't know that he ever got it.
Okay.
Yes.
Pratt was involved in that.
I actually sent a Domino's pizza to Jimmy Anderson.
Outstanding.
So, thank you, Jimmy. Oh,
thank you, Jimmy. Right. Well, I'm sure he would express some gratitude if given the opportunity.
I wonder what did the Cubs? My guess is they tried to send him back to Iowa, and he.
So we're talking off-season transactions, and I've got the schedule up too because we're going to probably scroll through the agony and the ecstasy that was the season in as best as we could chronological order. But immediately I'm looking early and then think back to the fact that the Cubs made a deal with the Atlanta Braves, and I can't even remember who they traded. All I remember is that they had a prospect. Juan Cruz, I believe. That's what it was. They finally gave up on Juan Cruz because Juan Cruz did pitch in the playoffs the year before. And I can't remember all of it. I think Ruben Quevedo might have been a different deal, but they got a guy who made his debut, I want to say, against his former team, first week into the season in Atlanta. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy Pratt. Who may have thrown about 35 pitches for the Cubs, and
they were all balls.
Fewer than 5 were strikes, and he was never heard from again. I mean, how many times did we talk about the Cubs just getting burned by trading with the Braves.
He was a
another.
diminutive fireballing lefty. 5'11", 160 pounds. Although he looked like he probably weighed a little more than 160 pounds. Actually, he made his debut against the Reds. And he pitched a scoreless inning with 1 walk. He then pitched twice. He pitched back-to-back days against the Braves.
Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday?
I don't know. April 9th and 10th, whatever that was.
All right, so he pitched the Friday game, April 9th, a game I'm just going to point out. I remember watching that in a bar in Portage Park where Todd Hollandsworth hit a game-tying 9th inning homer off of Braves closer John Smoltz, and the Cubs would go on to win in 15 innings. But the Saturday game is really where Andy Pratt's base on balls fireworks, I recall.
Well, I don't know.
Like, Jesus.
Maybe it was just a tough strike zone. In those 2 games combined, he threw 22 pitches. He threw 5 strikes. You were exactly right. He threw 5 strikes. In the second game, the one where he didn't give up any runs the first one. He pitched 2/3 of an inning and walked 2. Got out of it. In the next one, he did not record an out. And he walked 2. He gave up 2 runs. He threw 9 pitches and 1 strike.
Oof.
Yeah. So he just walked the 2 guys. They took him out, and somebody came in and gave up the runs after he left, obviously.
Right. Well, he walked the 2 guys. He only threw 9 pitches. Wow. Yeah. And I don't think he ever pitched again. So,
he pitched again for the Cubs. He got one more try. He got one more shot. He pitched on the 12th, 2 days later, pitched against the Pirates. And he didn't get anybody out again. And he walked 2 more guys. Oh, that one, he threw 9 pitches and no strikes. So his final. So at least I can't tell from this. For the Cubs for his career, 28% of the pitches he threw were strikes. But in his final 2 appearances, he threw 1 strike in 18 pitches.
Out of 19 pitches or 18 pitches, right?
Attaboy.
Wow.
Attaboy.
17 out of 18
Good
balls.
pickup.
Yeah.
He got traded for Ben Grieve.
Oh, we got something out of it. Ben Grieve would make a big catch late in the season, slamming his head in the wall. I think we talked about that before.
He was the player to be named later. The Cubs on the 31st of August, the Cubs sent a player named later and some cash for Ben Grieve.
Got it.
And then 4 days later, that player named later was Andy Pratt, who I'm sure was lighting it up in Iowa.
Wow. But yeah, the Cubs defending champs, high hopes. They had all these players here, right? We've got upgrades. We don't really lose much.
Yeah.
They start 3-3, but they had to open up with 6 on the road. So it's a good team. And then they finally come home, and there's a game I wanted to just remember because I think about it a lot. But the events of Friday, April 16th.
Yeah.
Friday game of the season.
This was I thought the troubling from a fan reaction standpoint.
100%. I think
was
we're
really troubling. Now, I'm sure I don't remember. By the way, RIP to the Cub convention. Apparently, it's never coming back.
Huh?
They've canceled it again because the Ricketts don't want to get yelled.
What am I going to do with these new sweatpants I just bought?
But I'm sure Dad and I went to the Cub convention. I'm sure it was fraught with we're going to get them. There was a feeling that the 2003 season had never really ended. It just kind of paused for a second. The Cubs reloaded, and there was way too much intensity in April.
100%.
Like now we're going to get it. We're going to win every goddamn game, and this was a ridiculous, really exciting finish. And the fans went nuts like the Cubs had won the World Series, and it wasn't just they were happy. There was this like weird energy.
Yeah.
During the it was alarming.
Wow. Okay, so that's not just my take because I'm happy to hear you say that and you articulated it better than I could. I just remember like Jesus Christ, the fans are already at 60 miles an hour. It's April. Like fuck, it's a long season. It doesn't help that you got Chip Carey, who is absolutely in step with that sort of just unbridled and uncritical, just bloviating, and that game, by the way, folks, if you really want to subject yourself to what we're talking about, because I think it summarizes it. It's the first Friday game at Wrigley Field. All 3.5 hours of it are on YouTube. And it's a crazy ass game in which the Cubs were down 9-4 after the 6th inning. And I can, spoiler alert, they do win, but not before some crazy things happen. But I'm happy that you've basically sort of set the tone of what was going on, because it felt weird. It was like, okay, we were close to the World Series. We hope to get back there. We got a good team. And holy shit, like, why are we acting like every goddamn inning's the most? Yep. Granted, this was a thrilling game, and it was probably I think it was an unusually warm weather day too. So, sometimes that happens, but it wasn't just this game. But I think it was like every game around it, frankly. But this game is on YouTube, and you'll kind of see, like, what is it, October? And, It's not even opening day, but they're going crazy. So
everybody's bundled up. But there's the
so
Ivy's dead. Well, I don't know that.
Yeah.
It was
odds are it's going to be cold. So maybe
it's one of those. If you watch the replay of it, you'd be like, "Oh, is this a late season game?" Because it looks cold there, but then you realize there's no ivy. So no, it's not a late season game.
Ivy's still in full bloom late in the year. So
there was a thing that happened. I didn't remember that. I mean, I remembered how it ended, but I did not remember that when they were down. They were down 10-7 in the 8th, and Todd Hollandsworth hit a 2-run homer.
Yeah,
to make it 10-9.
Hollandsworth would have huge. I'm going to give credit for Todd Hollandsworth before I crap on him. All within the same season, because he was absolutely clutch. It was Sammy who got hurt, right? Did he sneeze? Was that what it was? He pulled a rib muscle when he sneezed, and Hollandsworth was another addition we should add. That was an improvement. He was a fourth outfielder.
Another guy who had won the World Series the year before with the Marlins.
And then, right, exactly. With
him and Lee got their rings in the Wrigley Cup.
That's right. And he was forced into action when Sammy was out, and he absolutely fucking helped carry the team, including this day. We could talk about the Angels game later with a catch he made. But yeah, Hollandsworth had a big homer.
That Angels game, there's an incredible
story. It's a Greggie story. We talked about it. We'll give it its due, because this is the season. But you're right. But the Hollandsworth homer that made the game closer happened after an event that we both are eager to discuss, that you won't probably readily find in Baseball Reference, but it happened. And, it's a funny thing that happened that involved Johnny B. Baker, Cubs manager.
Oh, God, I didn't realize these were the same game. Holy crap.
What else happened in this game?
Well, that.
Oh,
I didn't realize this happened, plus the Holly homer, and then Danny Graves trotting in to get the save, and Sammy ties it, and Moises wins it with back-to-back homers. I forgot.
I remember the back-to-back homers, because then it was like, all right, fine, just have your fun, fans.
Yeah, so we had remembered that, not that this is still not researched as crap. We did this minutes before we started. We remembered, we were trying to place how many times this happened at Dusty, and so I didn't just Google it. I went to Discipio and search for it, because there is no finer chronicle of the 2004 season than Discipio.com.
It's basically Wikipedia.
But I have a post on there from 2008, and it's relevant because in the post it said, remember back on September 16th, I should have read this because then it's pretty obvious, when the Cubs won that wild game against the Reds and back-to-back homers in the ninth by Sammy and Moises. That game contained another famous moment, when Dusty Baker's Cubs batted out of order in the 7th inning. Yeah. Remember Dusty going nuts and blaming the home plate umpire for misinterpreting how he wanted to double switch Ramon Martinez into the game. Dusty stood on the tie. He didn't go out to the ump to tell him. Dusty sent Ramon in and then did the hook 'em horns thing and kind of twisted his hand a little bit it's a double switch. Dusty, a lot of times umpires, that's fine. Whoever the umpire was, I don't know.
It was C.B. Buckner, we found out. So in Dusty's defense, so
you have two morons. You have C.B. and you have Dusty, and bad things are going to happen. So anyways, and then there was a frenzy on the field. Dusty threw his hat and all that stuff.
Yeah, I remember. It was like Dusty. Everybody was swept up. It wasn't just the fans, I think, too. I think they came out of the gate way too geeked. It was not sustainable.
Right. So that happened in this game. But then the reason I wrote about it in 2008 was, what day was this? This was May 12, 2008. So on May 11th, 2008, I wrote, well, guess what happened to Dusty's Reds yesterday? And I have a thing from Hal McCoy at the Cincinnati Post.
I remember Hal McCoy.
He's a good guy. Reds batted out of order in the ninth. The play had no effect on the game, but made for an embarrassing end to an ugly day. That was my fault, Baker said. The lineup was right on the board and on my lineup card, but I didn't catch it.
Okay. At least he owned it.
But the best part of this is the two players that were involved for the Reds. David Ross went up to lead off the inning in the 8th spot, but Corey Patterson was actually in the 8th spot in the batting order. So Willie Randolph did the right thing. You have to let the guy who's batting out of order, you have to let him bat. And
Correct.
Complete
Otherwise,
the at-bat.
it doesn't
If you catch it too early, the team's allowed to just replace him.
100%. Yeah.
Ross flied out to right, and Willie came out and pointed out the error.
Yeah.
This is the best part. Corey ends up with the out then. So David Ross flew out for Corey Patterson. That was nice. There was a 12-minute delay while the umpires sorted things out. And Dusty, Dusty's excuse was
in 08.
His normal bench coach, Chris Spire, was coaching third base because the regular third base coach had flown to Arizona to be with his ailing father. So the guy who apparently Chris Spire was the bat in order coach.
Oh,
he wasn't there, and so there was no way they could do it. So David Ross bumbled his way up to at bat and cut ahead of Corey because he wanted to get an extra bat.
Somebody had to point out to Dusty how batting orders actually go in sequence. So
honestly, I didn't even know until I just read it now that David Ross and Corey Patterson were going to be involved.
That's wonderful.
Oh, it just gets better. This is why we love Remember This Crap.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, it was a little too intense, a little too soon. I'm scanning through. I hope I didn't skip over any other games, but unless there's anything else from this Friday afternoon. Cubs did win it, as you say, on back-to-back game-tying and walk-off game-winning homers by Alou and Sosa, or Sosa and Alou?
Sammy, then Moises.
Okay, yeah, Moises did win the game.
And that got the Cubs red hot. They would lose the next 2 games. Yeah, so it didn't, including one of them in 10 innings. With Sweaty Joe took the loss.
That would be a kind of a sign. Yeah, they got off to an uneven start. There's a 6-game winning streak there in April. So that righted the ship. But yeah, they start off 6-6, which is okay. They're not going to panic.
So Sweaty had an abbreviated season. He got hurt.
Yes, but he also was bad. Yes. But he's probably bad because he was hurt.
Who could have foreseen either of those things? How did your journeyman pitcher, who you bumbled into as a closer, how could you possibly think he might struggle the next year? And then on top of that, how about the fact that a guy that you basically threw out there every day for the last 3 months of the season, that his arm would fall off?
Oh, sure.
There's no way to know that could happen. That's why you don't go out and actually get a real closer. You spend plenty of money on your bullpen, but you get LaTroy and Mercker, and don't go find a real closer because what are you going to need that for?
Right. LaTroy and Mercker were the additions to a very thin bullpen, and although they didn't know this in December, but Prior started the year in the DL, didn't he?
Yes.
And so, wow. Wood didn't, surprisingly. He made his second and only opening day start, but
is this the
second and final?
Is this the year when I guess I could look this up. The Cubs had a game in LA. It was like a getaway day game. It was a day game against the Dodgers. I think it was one where Dusty started like a ridiculously bad lineup, and the Cubs scored a shitload of runs and won. But is that the game where the top of the second or the bottom of the second they go and Kerry is not standing on the mound anymore? There's a new pitcher. I know that happened at Dodger Stadium where he was like, "No, my arm just fell off." It's like, no, everybody's arms are falling off.
It was a day game? The one if we're thinking that it was a travel day, you said, right?
Yeah, I just don't know if both of them were.
Well, it wouldn't be Thursday, May 13th. I don't think it was in 04. I think it was in 05.
Well, because that's the thing with Kerry. We have lots of years to pick from.
Right. Lots of DL trips because at this point Kerry Wood's in his seventh season.
That day, the May 13th game, is the Dusty's getaway day lineup that scored 6 runs in the second inning. This was the lineup: Tom Goodwin in center field, Jose Macias at second base. He did play Moises and Aramis, but Hollandsworth played right. Sammy might have either was resting or, but Derrek Lee played. But Ramon Martinez played short, and Paul Bacco got to catch.
Was Nomar pitching for the Dodgers? Yes. Yeah. So that scrub lineup on travel day kept them from getting swept, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're going to say?
Well, that and David Ross was catching for the Dodgers.
All right. Now, do you know what happened the night before in Dodger Stadium? You will if you see the losing pitcher, because you can only think of one thing, maybe, I would imagine, in Dodger Stadium in that pitcher. One unique event.
Oh, God. So this was the Matt Clement, Alex Cora. 13 foul balls and then a home run.
Yeah. That happened in 04. God. And it kind of cemented, like, Matt Clement. Like, I was appreciative of him giving 2 of his finer seasons of the Cubs. But there are things about him that never sat right with me. One, like not really availing himself readily to pitch when he needed to be down the stretch, although he was well rested. And it just seems like just the type of wuss that would give up a homer to Alex Cora after failing to put him away after 18 pitches.
Yeah, I mean, you at some point, you just hit him in the ass with the pitch and then move on.
He took him yard. Yeah. I never thought we would cover that Dodgers getaway day, but I remember that because that was back in the days when we'd be goofing around, in our offices with the DeCipio Gamecast.
How about on the next day, Friday, May 14th, they went to San Diego and Greg Maddux outdueled 2 former Cub stars, one who had returned, outdueled the great Ismael Valdez.
Oh wow! I think I've mentioned before.
Ismael had changed the spelling of his name by then; it was now with a Z instead of an S.
Is that right? Did he switch his name?
Yeah, at some point in his career, he basically said, you guys can spell my name.
Old Blisters Valdez, right? The game after that, I'll tell you a fun thing that happened. Hopefully we don't have to go through every game. But I was at a wedding, and I remember watching this Saturday, May 15th. The Cubs would win the game. Sammy hits a homer in this game, but not before hitting this is the first year of Petco Park, I should add. They had like a pretty big foul territory. But in this game, Sosa comes up. It was, I don't know what inning it was. It's whatever at bat happens when he hits a homer. But he hits a long foul pop down the third base line, and Padres rookie shortstop Khalil Green.
Oh yes,
blonde-haired, blue-eyed Khalil Green comes all the way over and drops the ball. And then on the next pitch, Sosa hit. I think it was like a go-ahead home.
Well, all right, since we're going game by game, do you want to know what happened the next day?
No. Yes, I do.
Sammy sneezed and threw out his back.
Bingo, full circle. And that
I knew it happened at Petco, and I just looked, and he didn't play right that day, and he didn't play the next 2 days, so that had to be
perfect.
Had to be when he.
Well, hey, if we got to go through this whole damn schedule because that Anaheim series wasn't too far after, it was a few weeks. Let me make sure we don't skip over. So yeah, from that point, Todd Hollandsworth. So yeah, the Cubs they sweep the Padres, and the Padres were, I think, generally pretty good. I can't remember. Bochy was he was probably still their manager. I don't know. Anyway, Cubs sweep them in brand new belt. And the Cubs are a good team. They're 22-15, but Sammy's out. But have no fear. Here comes Todd Hollandsworth. Yeah. Cubs tread water. They have a pretty bad losing streak there. Get swept in Pittsburgh right before Memorial Day. Oh, Memorial Day week. I guess we have to talk about the Rob McCowiak Friday. Okay. That was kind of like it for Joe Borowski, right? So doubleheader on Friday, May 28th, 29th, or May 28th. And Cubs go into this series kind of licking their wounds, losing just 2, really. They just lost a 2-game set in Houston. And they're 25-20. So, now we can get hungry. We're playing the Pirates. They suck. And in back-to-back games of a doubleheader, both ends of a doubleheader, Rob McCowiak, did he not have a walk-off on both? That would seem too insane. I think maybe he tied one game. I don't think that's right.
Didn't he have a baby?
Yeah, maybe. He's also from the South Side.
He walked off game 1. Off
a Sweaty Joe, yeah. I remember I was driving up to Monaco.
So how many hits did he have in that game? Because he had a career in a day. He's only 1 for 5, but with 4 RBIs in the first game.
Okay.
And then in game 2, what did he do? Oh, he didn't even start.
Did
he hit another walk-off?
Yeah, it's a walk-off win.
So he walked off.
Yeah.
No,
It was not a home run?
He tied the game in the bottom of the 9th off of LaTroy.
That's some foreshadowing.
Craig Wilson. Remember the little Captain Caveman? He was another caveman guy.
He had
great
these
defensive
teeth.
shortstop with those awful teeth.
They had two Wilsons. They
he
had
hit the
Jack
first
Wilson
pitch
too.
of the bottom of the 10th inning off of Francis Beltran for a home run when the Cubs got
yeah.
swept.
He looks like a malnourished, sleep-deprived, like Dickens character, Craig Wilson. And
I
they also had
I think
Wilson.
Makoviak, he hit the walk-off, ran over to the hospital. His wife had the baby. And then he came back and he's like, "Hey, I'm a new father. You want to pinch hit?" Sure. And he hits a home run. And he went back to the hospital again. I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Yeah.
In which game here? In the this is game 2. Was this a major league debut? No, he played the year before. Dave Kelton played in the game for the Cubs, but he had played some games before.
Well, I've mentioned it before. In his major league debut, I was listening to this game on the radio in 2003. I think it was in Baltimore in an interleague game. Dusty had him come up in like the 5th inning and had him try to lay down a sacrifice.
Good.
It's fucking cruel.
Good.
Dave Kelton, though. Good call. And then the Cubs did see Josh Fogg, former White Sox. I mean, it was kind of brutal there. The Cubs could not get out of their own way against Pittsburgh, but they finally, because they were a better team, take it out of the Pirates, the 12-1 win, to salvage it. And then, hey, let's get underway. But they struggled. I mean, you look at LL, WW, they couldn't get on track. And, yeah, and then the Anaheim, we should probably, because there's a whole, I don't know if there's anything in between there. I mean, they play the Cardinals at home and they lose 2 out of 3. That's annoying.
Especially since one of the games is Matt Morris beats Mark Prior.
Yes.
And
yes.
The Cubs
and they
12
crushed Prior.
We're
already dealing with we don't know at the time, but we're dealing with the husk of Mark Prior. I got to find out when Prior made his debut in 2004. It's just ridiculous.
He's 0-1 with that loss.
That could have been it.
3 2/3, 5 hits, 5 runs, 5 walks, 1 strikeout. That's not Mark Prior.
He was already not the same. He would put together good numbers. We'll tally it up at the end. But
look at the Cardinals pitching line that day was just full of old favorites. Matt Morris got the win. Remember Kiko Calero? He got a hold. Ray King, former Cub.
Yep.
He got a hold. Another former Cub, Julian Tavares, and then everybody's favorite, the guy who finished up, Steve Klein.
Oh, God.
What an awful fucking person, Steve Klein.
Yeah, just a borderline human. Just something. Yeah, that whole team. So annoying. So where were they? Did you have the box? I'm wondering where were they at the end of that day. I'm going to pull it back of that series. So actually, no, I was wrong. The Cubs took 2 out of 3, right? The only loss was the Morris Prior. So they split a 4-game series. So still annoying that.
31-29.
Yeah.
31-28. Then they headed off to Anaheim, and the first game would be a matchup of John Lackey against Greg Maddux.
Excellent.
So the Hollandsworth homer and the Greg Maddux thing obviously did not happen in the same game, considering the Cubs lost.
Well, it wasn't a Hollandsworth homer. You're not going to find it. It was a catch he made.
Oh, that's right. Was that in this game? I thought that was in a win.
No, it was the Saturday. It wasn't a win. Did they have an extra inning win in there? Yeah, it was the extra inning game. So you're not going to find it in baseball. So, yeah, let's hone in on Greggie's start on Friday night when I already mentioned Vladimir Guerrero at the top. Could have figured he'd come up. But by now, here I am heckling Guerrero in 1998 on opening day against the Expos, and he's already now become a top star, and he's in the first year of a rich new contract, no longer an Expo. He's in Anaheim. And Greg Maddux is with the Cubs, and Maddux, of course, had spent 6 years probably just running circles around the kid, but also wary of him, knowing his strengths, studying him as Maddux would do as he became a greater player. So Maddux probably had some dominion over Guerrero, but had to keep working his ass off and studying to keep it that way. And I'm sure Guerrero maybe hit him a few times. Had to have. He was a Hall of Famer. And there's an at-bat in this game, and you can find it because there's extra bases. Yep, there it is. And you can probably just break down the description, but what Baseball Reference won't tell you is that in that at-bat where Guerrero, what does he do? He hits one off the wall, off of Maddux. And it was on either a 2-2 or 3-2 pitch.
It was he singled to center. He may have hit.
It was just a single. All right, so in my mind it was
the story. The thing that makes the story famous because it's not a huge moment in the game. There's one out. No. Vlad's up. But on a 1-2 pitch, Manic throws one of those little backup. I don't even know what it was. And
Guerrero
he doesn't.
froze.
And completely freezes Vladdy. It's strike 3, and the ump calls it a ball. And Maddox, who rarely gets mad, is pissed. They throw the ball back, and he literally snaps the ball out of the air, and he's yelling.
And I remember watching this as a fan at the time, being enraged. I'm like, he got him, because Maddox was getting by more and more on guile anyway.
And on the next pitch, Guerrero singled. He ended up stealing second, and then Jose Guillen tripled, and Casey Kochman got a base hit. So Greg ended up giving up a couple of runs.
I dare say Greg may have gotten a little rattled, but there's a reason for it.
So at the story, I don't even know if the story was told after the game. It's just one that's been passed down.
I read about it a couple years later.
Yeah, he got asked why he was so mad, and Greg said, in the only way Greg could, he said, I've been setting him up for that pitch for 8 years, I made it, and I didn't get the call.
Yep,
8 years, and he's not kidding. And we've talked about it before. I could do a whole remember this crap. Greg Maddox.
It would be 6 years, but yeah, same thing.
About one of his famous things was he gave up in a game that the Braves were way ahead. He gave up a long home run to Jeff Bagwell.
The spoiler shutout.
And he got asked about it later, and they said, well, that's a tough way to lose a shutout. He's like, I don't care. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, I threw him a pitch that when I need to get him out, I will never throw. He said, but hitters only remember what they hit. He goes, he'll look for that pitch for the next 5 years.
Yeah, I will always think about that. The Guerrero's hit because I saw it real time, and I don't think I read about it for a couple of years. And somebody hearkened. He may have answered that after the game, but I just remember reading him break that down a couple years later, and I'm like, I remember that at bat, and you did have him, and and the fact that he took 6 years to set him up for it, it's just peak Maddox.
Well, and we remembered it because Greg got mad, and it was so weird.
Yeah,
it's the fourth inning of a game. It's a 2-1 game. What's he pissed for? Well, that's why he was pissed. I mean, you can still picture it. Him, because when Greg would get mad, he would his hat would end up on the back of his head, and then he snaps at the thing, and then he has to stomp over the mound and put his hat down, and then he immediately composes himself. It lasts 10 seconds, but you do see it.
Yep. And then in Anaheim on Sunday, the Cubs actually close out a series win with the aforementioned Hollandsworth making some ridiculous catch to keep the game going. Cubs win in extra innings, 33-29. And I looked too after that St. Louis split. They were only about 3 games out, but it's it's only. It's
right, but then
June.
they leave Anaheim and they go to Houston for 4 games, and they win them all.
Yeah, they beat Roger Clemens, one of them, and that's the Jimmy Anderson save, maybe.
It is.
So. Yeah, it picks up from
Prior. Clemens. Anderson gets the save. Right after the game, he gets traded. He gets traded to the Red Sox for a guy named Alan Shipman.
Oh, sorry.
Andy Pratt got traded for Ben Greggie.
Sorry, my bad.
And I can only imagine that the Red Sox, who were about to break their long curse, were like, Jimmy Anderson is the final piece. Did you see the 4-inning save he just got against the Astros? That's the guy we need, and it worked. Because they won the World Series that year. It's all because they traded for Jimmy Anderson.
No doubt. So, and then the Cubs get an exciting interleague series coming in on Friday when I think the entire triumvirate of Mulder, Hudson, and Zito came into town. I'm pretty sure they started all 3 games. And I went to the Saturday game, went with my in-laws.
Friday was Mark Redmond. The only Marlin starter that they could routinely bludgeon in the playoffs,
and that old
and they
Jack
beat him, and he beat
got
him
the hell out of that.
Came back with Oakland and beat him,
and he was the only one to beat them because I think they beat either Mulder or Hudson on Saturday. They didn't beat him; they won in extras, and I only bring this game up because it was just it was genuinely exciting, even though it was only June. It's just an exciting game.
Mark Mulder doesn't like me.
No,
he got very mad at me on Twitter. He wrote, I don't even remember my original smart-ass tweet back to him. But he, in his defense to me, he basically said something about his World Series ring. Well, he won a World Series with the Cardinals, and he didn't pitch. In fact, I don't think
he bragged about it.
I don't think he pitched, not just in the World Series. I don't think he pitched in the season.
Okay.
So it's like, all right, fuck off, Mark. He's a prick. Everybody knows he's a prick. There's going to be lots of pricks in this podcast.
There sure are, especially as we,
That would have been 06. He didn't. He was 6-7. I think I made fun of his 7.14 ERA that year that they won the World Series.
Sure,
that was very good. Yes, and he did not pitch in that playoffs at all. But good on you, Mark Mulder.
Well, sure.
So the Cubs beat him on. He must have started the Saturday game.
Well, I don't know if it was.
I guess
him
it could
or,
have been Hudson.
Yeah, it was one of. I'm pretty sure because Oakland was stacked then, right? And this is a few years after Moneyball, and then this is when people started going, well, if Billy Beane, everyone says Billy Beane, on base. I mean, so they did have three good pitchers. Like, well, I'll be a genius on Moneyball if I had, Hudson, Mulder, and Zito. They were like this triumvirate. They never won anything, of course, but they were very well recognized at the time.
Mulder did pitch the Saturday game.
He did. Okay. And so, a game that I was at, and it was a tight, closely pitched game. Cubs are down 1-0 in the ninth inning, and I don't know how they got 2 runners on or whatever. But then Michael Barrett, new catcher, hits slams one the opposite field right over the first base, right down the line, all the way into the corner, and it allowed Todd Walker to score from first. It was kind of iconic, I would say, at the time, because Walker had to, it's exciting, right? What do they say, like, home run's exciting, but really a triple is exciting, which means really an inside the park homer is really the most exciting play.
Oh, and it was a Fox game.
Yeah, it's national television. But like whenever a game can end with like there's all that action, there's like a guy, people running 360 or 200 or 180 feet, 270 feet, an outfielder sprinting to get a ball and make a good accurate throw, a guy's catching it. All of that is going on like clockwork. And Todd Walker comes all the way from first, just ahead of the throw at the plate, slides head first, and we were going bananas.
That was off of Chad Bradford.
Yeah, the closer.
Mulder, actually, it was the A's were up 3-2 going into the ninth. Mulder had scattered 10 hits over 8 innings and 2 runs.
Prior, I was looking at the Saturday game. Sorry,
Prior
You're
had
right.
Another game that Prior started. He gave up 3 runs in 5 innings. He wasn't pitching very deep. Dusty must have been killing Dusty to take him out. 85 pitches. He's just getting warmed up.
Right. Yeah, Cubs are in the midst of a little hot streak. Then they close out the series by, the A's are perennial playoff team. They beat Zito. They beat Zito the next day, and then they go to St. Louis. And I have to stop here just for 2 quick games. The first game I remember so well, and it's a game that I always think of about how much I love Aramis Ramirez. Otherwise nondescript Tuesday night game in June, and my baseball reference is a little slow, but I was curious where the Cubs stood in relation to the Cardinals going into this game. There couldn't have been that much separation, but Cubs are a game back or 2 games. They're right there. All right, so because the Cardinals would pull away. And I remember playing, I think we had softball practice. I don't think we had a game, but I remember being at some bar up in like on Damon Avenue by Winnemac Park with some of the guys I was playing with. And the Cubs were trailing the top of the 8th, and LaRussa goes with Isringhausen. And I don't know if you found the game, and I'm happy to follow it through. I just remember Ramirez, who just one of the most timely clutch hit. Honestly, I know he didn't do anything in the 07-08 playoffs and really didn't do that much in 03 other than the Grand Slam. But it just seems like year in and year out, he never gave away at bats. He'd make pitchers work. And this time, down a run, he does the ever exciting game tying and go ahead 2 RBI double off of Isringhausen with 2 out in the 8th, and then fucking Farnsworth and who we got now? We got LaTroy. I think Borowski's done now, because in my memory, Borowski pretty much faded away after the McCoyak disaster. But in this game, they got LaTroy closing it out. Didn't have that much trouble, but it just felt so good. It's like, get rid of St. Louis. We already got rid of him last year, and then that was like the high point. It never was like that. The next day, I was on the road. I think I was in Kentucky for work, and I remember being at my hotel bar watching the game the next night. I think Todd Walker may have hit a home run in this game. The Cubs had a lead on the Cardinals again, so a pretty good lead maybe too. And all I remember about this game is that A, Kyle Farnsworth shit the tub, and that B, Kent Mercker acted like a complete fucking idiot and got ejected. I remember, why are you acting like why are you like losing your shit? Like, he pitched poorly and he was bitching about the umpire, and that is another example of foreshadowing. And I remember watching that game in the bar and just being disgusted. I mean, you had a chance to take the first 2 games, stole the game last night, you had a big lead this night, and you blew it. And that would just be a fucking microcosm of how things went, really for the Cubs in general, but the Cubs vis-a-vis the Cardinals.
I think the underrated thing about this series in June of 2004 was the fact that it's the Saturday game. Was it Saturday? Really, I don't know. I guess it's
no, it's Tuesday, Wednesday,
the
Thursday.
Tuesday game. The Tuesday night game, the Ramos game.
Yes.
Was a matchup of future Hall of Fame catchers. Yadi Molina hitting 225 and Paul Bacco hitting 213.
Oh, of course.
Attaboy Gabor.
Nice call.
And for anybody wondering why I'm calling Paul Bacco Gabor, well, just look his name up and you'll see why.
It's just showing some respect.
Yes, it's his mama named him Gabor.
Mama named him Gabor. I'm gonna name him Gabor. Right.
I still remember the day I found that out. That was just a gift from heaven. Gabor.
Right. Gabor. But yeah, so that was a taste of, and of course, right on the eve of the game where Kent Mercker and Kyle Farns with the bullpen shit the tub and started to let the Cardinals back in was the 20th anniversary of the Sandberg game. Way to go, fellas. That's another act of foreshadowing how much they would just crap on legacies. And I'm going to just call it out because I remember driving back from Kentucky the next day, listening to the game the next day when they lost the series. And I want to say Cesar Asturis made like 3 errors in the first couple innings. Was it Cesar Asturis or Ray Ordonez? Sorry, I get those two confused. Ray Ordonez.
That would have been Ray Ordonez.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And the
only thing he could do in the big leagues was field.
Correct.
And then he couldn't do that. He got released after that game, right?
Well, no, not right away. He played. I remember he was crying in the postgame, supposedly. So it's just a really frustrating series that started off on such a good note, man. Ramirez steals a win from them, and then they jump out to a big lead in the second game, and the bullpen pisses it away and then starts fighting with the umpires. Again, foreshadowing. And then they have a chance to save face and take the rubber match. And and they just can't. It was that series, probably a microcosm of the season. Yeah. So
they leave there, and then they have to go to the emotionally fraught crosstown series. So that was their road trip. They went to Seattle. They went to St. Louis and Comiskey, or whatever the fuck it was at the time.
Nice.
Where they lost 2 out of 3.
Frustrating.
Prior won the opener, and Carlos and Greggie got beat by, I don't even know who Diaz is. Felix Diaz.
And that was that. And that's a Comiskey.
Yeah, and those games were always like extra. Like the Sox fans were actually showing up at their park. They had to get directions, so they remember how to get there. And then they'd be all pissed that there were Cub fans there.
I already said that 0-2. We went into it when Kerry Wood walked the ballpark with a 8-0 lead, and the Cubs lost going away. That I would never ever go to a Cubs Sox game at Comiskey, and I still haven't. And so this is at this point I'm done with that series. It was fun in the beginning, and after so many years, it wasn't. So I don't even remember them losing that series. No. It had to piss me off though.
The Sunday game, the renowned drug trafficker Stevie Loaiza Esteban. Beat Greg Maddux.
Oh,
I don't know how many years Stevie's in a Mexican prison, I believe.
I believe so.
I don't think that'd be a place I'd want to be.
No, especially after being the first Mexican 20-game winner in so long that he was. Oh, he's out.
He's out.
All right. Well, he made a lot of money.
He'll be back. He got out in 2021. How ex-A's pitcher went from all-star to imprisoned drug dealer.
Was he not a White Sox?
Here's another. These are the headlines. These are great if you're Esteban Loaiza. The next headline: How Esteban Loaiza blew $44 million before massive cocaine bust.
I'd like to know.
Good job.
I will tell you that the following Friday, July 2nd, at Wrigley Field, was the first time in however many years that a Friday game at Wrigley Field did not start at 2:20 and went back to what all the other.
Is that because games. Esteban pitched for the White Sox? Is it because he had some business to take care of and he couldn't? I can't make 1:20.
He had to be done at 4:20. He only had 3 hours.
12:25 local time.
Well, I thought it was 1:25. That's off. I think what I remember is that I was working and I had to go to the warehouse to pulled some skids, and the warehouse manager, I thought he was messing with me. He was like, "Oh, the game's on, and they're throwing at each other." I think there was a little bit of tension early in that game, and I'm like, "What are you talking about? It's only 157. Game didn't start till 2:20." And then I was like, "Oh, wait, they start at 1:20." I'm surprised it said 12:20 in that thing. Maybe they revert to everything Eastern time.
Well, why wouldn't they? Why would it be unusual to not start at 1:20?
Because for years, somewhere after like lights settled in, remember Dallas Green
was 3:05.
After 3:05 start. So you don't remember this. But I would say, I'm going to just say, let's say from like 1991. So it's only not that long, but through 2003, every Friday Cubs game was at not 1:20, not 3:05, right, but 2:20.
2:20, yeah, because the A's game was 2:20. I remember that.
Yeah, and that was the last one. And then it was like a novelty in its own right, which meant like, hey, if you work downtown, you could maybe take off in the afternoon. It was, part of that weird tradition where the Cubs generally don't play. They played at 3:05 last Friday. Actually, I had shades of Dallas Green in my head because they never schedule games. Sometimes they do on Saturdays at 3:05, but just absolute trivial, pointless fact that Friday, July 2nd was when they finally went back to 1:20 games on Friday after like a 12-year run.
The Cubs won, so maybe that's why. The Cubs would sweep those three against the
Sox. Yeah.
The last one was a walk-off. Is this like, do we have a Derek White home run in these? I can't remember what year.
No, that's 98. I was at that game.
Yeah,
that was way off.
Todd Walker walked.
Oh, yeah.
With
the
bases
Japanese
loaded
pitcher.
Against Dumbasso Marte.
Oh, for some reason I thought it was their Japanese pitcher.
Well, Shingo had gave up a single, an intentional walk, and a walk. They took him out, and Marte walked Walker.
That's right. Todd Walker with a walk-off walk. Wow. Sounds good.
They had tied the game off of LaTroy. El Caballo. Carlos Lee hit a homer in the top of the ninth. And the Cubs walked it off in the bottom.
Okay. Sweep the series. That was
what
a
was
Sunday
Shingo?
night.
He was Agent Zero. Wasn't that his nickname?
Yeah, right?
That just seems racist.
That game was a Sunday night game, too, I know. And then I don't even remember when the Cardinals came back to Wrigley, but they take 2 out of 3. That, just annoying because they're pulling away now.
Well, so the Cubs. Well, so the Cubs they won the last game of against the Astros. Then they sweep the White Sox. Think, all right, here we go. They got some momentum. They go to Milwaukee. They get swept. Then they lose. They have to go back to St. Louis, and they lose 2 out of 3.
A 5-game losing streak right there, and they're 46-40 on July 10th. So frustrating. 6 games over 500, and you're halfway through the season. Not it's just fits and starts. It's with all the expectations, it's starting to get annoying, right? Like everyone's celebrating the World Series with every base hit in April. And then the reality sets in. It's a long season, and they're just, playing under the increasing weight of all of it. I don't know. I'm not trying to let them off the hook, but
one of the things we didn't talk about in the early season, and honesty compels me.
Okay, Chip.
Do you remember what the most in April for those home games? What the crowd liked to chant?
Oh yes, he sop Choi. He sop Choi.
Derrek Lee got off to what we learned would be his traditional April start. At the end of April, the Cubs' prized acquisition was hitting .233 with 2 homers and 11 RBIs, and it struck out 21 times in 21 games. That's not too bad. But once May came around, he hit 275 in May. He hit 385 in June. He hit 280 in July. He hit 270, and he then, like the rest of the team, he hit 217 in September.
Well, yeah,
but we had already learned to love him by then because he was like the coolest guy.
No, big D. Lee fan. We've been gifted with first baseman through the years. Yeah, after the Cubs
we're done with that. I can tell you.
For the foreseeable future. You're right.
Well, wait till
nothing on the horizon.
Mash Mervis shows up. Then, who, by all accounts, will make Frank Schwindel look like Jeff Bagwell defensively at first base.
Yes. Is that right? Oh shit! All right. Well, when the Cubs salvaged the last game of that game in the series at Wrigley, July 11th, they are now 7 games behind the Cardinals. So they went from after that Aramis pinning Isringhausen's ears back before Mercker and Farnsworth in the bullpen shit the tub. They were only a game out, I think. So within like 2 weeks, all of a sudden they're 7 games out. There were some fans that had already given up, but I'm like, fuck that, fuck the Cardinals. But Cardinals got hot. They won a shitload of games that year.
Yeah, they were game out on June 22nd, and then they went to 2 out, 3 out, 4 out, 5 out, and then if you jump ahead, not very long, within a month, they were 10 games out.
Yeah.
And you think, 9 games in a month. Yeah, that's a lot of ground to lose in 1 month. 9 freaking games.
Yeah, that 5-game losing streak, just poorly timed, but all right, whatever. We can set our sights.
Well, yeah, the 5-game losing streak, the lead goes they go from 3 down to 4 down to 5 down to 6 down to 7 down to 8 down. So basically, the Cardinals had won every day that the Cubs lost, and
they swept the Cubs.
Well, and two of those in there were Cardinal wins. Hey, the Cubs won the final game of that.
Oh, that's right. They didn't sweep the Cubs.
Kerry Wood beat Chris Carpenter.
Yeah, actually, they didn't. Yeah. Oh. What'd you find?
Was this the game? Is this the game Carpenter blew out his elbow? Sunday night.
I thought Carpenter pitched later in the season against the Cubs. Oh. I don't remember that.
Oh, he must have, because they wouldn't have made the World Series if he had gotten hurt that year.
That's true.
So that was just a routine drubbing of Chris Carpenter, nothing historic.
Right. Normally he seemed to have their number. Yeah, because I remember a game he pitched against him. I want to say later on where the Cubs were, in retrospect, really more on his like their new dumbass meatball catcher was like jawing with the Cardinals and. Like Carpenter's jawing with Sosa, but it just turned, I guess, in by mid-June. It wasn't fun. It stopped being kind of fun, frankly. That summer was kind of, next thing you know, we're in August. The Cubs are 10.5 out, and no games are standing out except they inexplicably lose 2 out of 3 to San Diego at home. I remember August 10th, 11th, and 12th. I just remember the rubber match. It's like, no. Stop fucking around and win this game. I think Khalil Green just hits a ball in the hole to tie it in the 9th, and they're letting games slip away. The Cardinals are running with the division, and you're at that point now, right, where you're just trying to convince yourself, no, this team's really good. They just, we just got to get in. But really, the evidence since June and really all season is just pointing to they just don't have it. And I didn't mean to jump into August by skipping over the trade deadline because they did make a big addition.
I don't remember that. Okay, so before we get to that,
sorry, I was just rambling.
No, it's good. We're halfway?
Yeah, we're pretty good. We're probably going to spend a lot of time in September, at least the last 2 weeks.
So now seems like a good time to say the NFL's opening week was action-packed and is just getting started. Get ready for week 2 of touchdowns, big plays, and even bigger wins with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. This week, new customers can bet just $5 on any football game and get $200 in free bets instantly. Want more action?
I do.
Everyone can experience the thrill of DraftKings early win promotion. It's simple.
How's that work?
This Sunday, you bet on any NFL team to win. If your team leads by 10 at any point during the game, you get paid instantly, even if your team loses. Now, when could we think of an example where that happened? Oh, that's right. It happened to the 49ers. They got up 10-0 on the Bears. So here's what I think you should do. Do you think the Packers are going to get up 10 points on the Bears at any point on Sunday night? Of course they are. So you bet the Packers. The Packers get up 10-0. There is a chance of thunderstorms on Sunday night. Thunderstorms come in. The Bears, who are the best mutters in the NFL, come back, win the game, but you've already won your bet. So you win the bet, and you get to watch the Bears win.
So wait, can I ask, not to interrupt the read, but you bet the Packers. Is that your free bet? If you also bet the Bears, seemingly hedging against yourself, you don't get the $10 incentive, but if they cover the spread or however you bet, you still win that? Is that
So you're gonna go onto the app and you're gonna look
Yes.
for the early win promotion, and you're gonna
Early win promotion.
opt in, and then
Take the Packers with that
and
promotion.
then you're gonna make a money line pick.
It's got to be on the money line. Got it.
So you're gonna pick the
Okay.
Packers. You're gonna pick that. You lock that bet in. Then you can bet on anything else you want.
But you can go back, bet the Bears, either money line or the spread.
But you're not. That's not part of the early win promotion. You're just making bets now.
Right. No, I'm just telling you how to do it in case you were paying attention last Sunday.
So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code POINTLESS to get $200 in free bets instantly when you place a $5 bet on any football game. That's code POINTLESS. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See the show notes for this episode of the podcast for details.
Oh, you don't have to read the URL?
The disclaimer is extensive. You would not want me to try to read this. A lot of phone numbers, a lot of web addresses. So you can go read it in the show notes. All right. So the thing I remember about the trade deadline was a couple of things. One of them was we were juggling a couple of things. Number one, the Cubs. It's like, all right, they're in the division's lost, but they're in a battle for the wild card, and it doesn't. We just saw a wild card team win the World Series the year before. It's just get in. Who cares how you get in?
And the Cubs themselves were an 88-win team that won a soft division. Just get it. Yeah, exactly.
And I didn't even. We should have looked for what day this happened. Honestly, I don't care enough. The Cubs were in need of a shortstop because their shortstop. Do you remember when Alex Gonzalez broke his arm?
I was there.
His wrist. He got hit by a pitch.
Yep.
The ump said it didn't hit him.
Correct.
And he broke his arm.
He stayed in, did not take his base, struck out, and then went on the DL with a ball that did not, according to the umpire, that did not hit him.
So the hot shortstop name on the market was the Montreal Expos shortstop, Orlando Cabrera.
Just so you know, so this is like you're pushing the timeline back a few months. This is not right because Gonzalez was healthy.
The rumor, well, yeah, but the Cubs were like, okay, Gonzalez broke his arm. The Cubs muddled along with Ray Ordonez and Ramon Martinez and any other.
Gonzalez came back.
He came back, but he sucked. And the Cubs were like, all right, we need a real shortstop. So a lot of rumors that they were the leader in the clubhouse for Orlando Cabrera because the Expos were doing Expo things and shedding players and getting ready
playing in Puerto Rico.
Getting ready to shut it down. And
that happened in 2004. All right, never mind. The Puerto Rico game. Sorry.
Yeah, there was that's the game where Jose Macias
just hit a ball that bounced on the turf of Hiram Boca Chica Stadium.
Former Cub.
Sorry.
Former Cub, Hiram Boca Chica.
Anyway,
still the greatest Puerto Rican baseball player of all time. Much better than Yadier Molina. And I mean, I guess Javi's Puerto Rican, but he went to high school in California or in Florida, and Francisco Lindor went to high school in Florida, so it's still hard.
They're New Yorkers, Floridians, yeah.
So a lot of trade rumors, and the trade deadline was in the late afternoon, and the Cubs
on a Saturday.
Cubs finished up a tough loss to Kevin Millwood, and the Phillies, and the trade deadline came and went, and there was no news. And Dusty sat in the cramped little interview room, didn't even have his kid on his lap this time. And somebody said, "Are you disappointed you didn't make any trades?" And Dusty goes, "Who said we didn't make any trades?"
Oh, Dusty knew.
And they said, "Oh, is there?" He said, trades can get announced after the deadline as long as the paperwork's turned in. And then Dusty answered a few more questions, got up and left, and it wasn't too much longer before word leaked out that there had been this ridiculous three-team trade.
Four-team. Minnesota Twins were involved because they're the ones who ended up with the Justin Jones sweepstakes, who was another one of the Cubs prospects that some of us were very excited about.
So the trade ended up being Nomar Garciaparra and Matt Merton to the Chicago Cubs from the Red Sox. The Twins sent Doug the iChart Mankiewicz to the Red Sox. The Expos sent Orlando Cabrera to the Red Sox. And the Cubs sent Frankie Beltran, Alex Gonzalez, and Brendan Harris to the Expos, and then to complete the trade, the Cubs sent Justin Jones to the Twins.
That's why it had to be a 14 trade. The Twins just had to have Justin Jones. Well, and the Red Sox had to have Mankiewicz. Wow. But Brendan Harris, God, I don't think his name has come up once.
Now, Brendan Harris, there was if you want to know what the history of prospect perverts.
Yeah.
There was a prospect pervert who during Brendan Harris's rookie season said he was going to be the next Albert Pujols. He had never seen a player tear up the Midwest League.
He said it about him. He was
like Albert Pujols, except for Brendan Harris.
I mean, just talk about short-sighted. It's like 2 years after Pujols. Like, there's going to be another one right away.
Just coming right up.
2 years after Pujols' debut, I should clarify.
So it was a monumentally exciting day because the Cubs were getting. They were just getting a new shortstop. They were getting a superstar, a former batting champion, an MVP,
rookie of the year '97. Yep.
And they were getting him from their future franchise savior Theo Epstein, who was like, get him out.
Sure. Yep.
Nomar had broken his wrist in spring training. Is that right?
I don't remember. That sounds like Sandberg in '93. Yeah, I don't remember that. Yeah, he was.
And he had only played 38 games for the Red Sox. But he was hitting .321 with a .367 on base and a .500 slugging. So he was still.
He was a great hitter. He had 200 hits as a rookie, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, he had won. I guess he never was MVP. He finished second. He was rookie of the year. He won back-to-back batting titles. He had .357 in 1999 and .372 in 2000.
Yeah. Dude could mash.
He ended up his career as a .313 career hitter.
In fact, at this point, he was still probably considered pretty much very much the equal of Jeter and Rodriguez. You know, there was the American League shortstops.
Yeah, he was better than Jeter.
Yeah, well, statistically.
At the time, everybody still thought it went A-Rod, Nomar, Jeter, and then injuries derailed Nomar to the point where Jeter climbed above Nomar, and then A-Rod did his weird A-Rod shit, and Jeter just kept winning, and Jeter ended up. I mean, everybody knows A-Rod's a better player, but Jeter. Well,
I think Nomar wasn't able to keep up because he's not even an arguable Hall of Famer, is he? Right? I mean. So
he doesn't have any of the. He had 229 career homers. He had .313.
Yeah,
383.
Really good player. Yeah, and he's a shortstop, even though he wasn't as effective there because he wasn't. There were some question marks, but it was still, hey, well, fucking take it because Alex Gonzalez sucked. I mean, Alex Gonzalez was a very good defensive shortstop. Game 6 notwithstanding, but. So it was a downgrade defensively, but it's like, oh shit, we got one of the best shortstops in the game all around. At least he can still play it somewhat.
So Nomar shows up and he's ready to play the next day.
Yeah, hits into a double play in his first at bat.
And do you remember what number he was?
It was not 5.
Nope. And he played one game with a different number.
Is that because Ruben Amaro wouldn't let him?
Because Michael Barrett was number 5.
Oh. And Michael's like, but if I don't have 5, what do I wear?
Yeah. So Nomar was 8. He took Alex Gonzalez's old 8, and then him and
they switched later.
Barrett switched the next day.
Okay, just like how Dennis Eckersley actually wore 40 and not 43 until Sutcliffe arrived with the Cubs. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Mark Grace played a couple of games as 28.
That's right. Yeah. Casey's keeping track.
Ernie Banks had to play the first 3 seasons without a number because the Cubs were like, we only give numbers to white guys. It was a sad moment in Cub history.
You know how much
it happened. We're not proud of it, but it happened.
Sewing these numbers in, yeah, exactly.
We're not sure you're going to stick around. We're not putting holes in the back of this jersey until we know for sure. Ernest.
The other thing that I'll remember about.
Well, do you know what else? Maybe you're going to say this. Do you know what was going to happen? What the big to do about that game on August 1st was?
Is that Dusty's like Corey Patterson is my leadoff hitter.
Well, okay, that and the fact that Greg Maddux was trying to win his 300th game.
Oh, that happened in San Fran. Oh, later. I would have thought that was earlier that summer. Okay, so I forgot that. Now I remember. That's why I'm happy to do this. So that's right. There was the confluence.
Greg,
Nomar's debut.
Greg had already insisted. Greg always, he's a very smart guy. He makes really good points. So I don't even know what number it was. I could look it up. Greg won a game for the Braves the year before. maybe even
You
2
told
weeks
about
before.
this. He counts playoff game. You told this on this.
Yeah. He at the end of the game, he handed a baseball to Leo Mazzoni. And Leo's like, what's this for? He's like, I just want to thank you for everything you've done for me. He's like, well, what is it? He goes, I won my 300th game today. He's like, what do you mean? And Greg's like, well, why don't playoff games count? And Leo's like, that's a pretty good point.
Yeah.
They should probably count extra, but they don't count at all.
Right.
So Greg was, as Milo would say, Greg was sitting on 299.
Yeah,
and he pitched 6 innings and only gave up 3 runs.
Cubs won, but
I believe it was tied when he left, and it was hotter than fuck, and Greg was tired, and basically told Dusty, "I'm done." And Dusty's like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah."
Well,
he goes, "I'd like us to hold on to the lead," and they did. The Cubs won.
In your writing back then, you would refer to Greg's turkey timer, that pop. It happened in a game in Cincinnati, but it might have been the next year where he had to run the bases and then he had to come out and the bullpen blew it, and it was frustrating because, like, Greg, why did you have to leave?
Here's the scary thing about it, right? Actually, no, that's right. Greg came out. Obviously they weren't winning, obviously, because they won. He would have got the win. They were down 3-2. They were only down by 1. And Greg told Dusty he was done, and Dusty's like, and he would have thought the Cubs
and it was 300th win. You'd think that he'd
stay in it. We're only a run down. We're going to stay in until we see if we can get the lead. They put Ryan Dempster in.
Okay.
And he tried to give up a run, but he couldn't.
How many guys he walk?
He gave up a single and a walk, and then Kent Mercker had to come clean things up for him. But then in the 7th, the Cubs rallied, and they did it with all their stars.
Tom Goodwin,
Sammy doubled. Aramis walked. Derrek Lee struck out, but Mark Grudzelanek doubled, scored Sammy, sent Aramis to third. Then Jose Macias, he singled. Give the Cubs the lead. Michael Barrett got a sacrifice fly, and then the new guy, as my mom had called him the night before, No-Rod.
Yes.
No-Rod Garcia-Parra.
Wow.
He singled.
You would be happy about that.
Drove in Jose Macias, and the Cubs would go on to win the game.
I apologize. The Cubs Expos Puerto Rican game was in 03 because Jose Macias hit that against the Cubs.
Oh, that's right. What I remember about that was a game where nobody caught a routine pop-up, and the Cubs lost.
Yeah, there was a few.
Alex Gonzalez went out and then peeled off, and it just landed out there. It's like
right, but it was in 03. So, yeah, but that was the other thing though, is that after all this back and forth, because I don't even know who the leadoff hitter was mostly. I think Todd Walker sometimes would go in, Grudzelanek would be there. Sometimes it'd be Patterson. I remember Dusty just committing to Patterson, and he got off to it just happened to coincide with like a 10-day BABIP hot streak for Patterson. So it looked really good. And the reason that created a problem is that when Patterson at leadoff cooled off after a week, and I'm looking at it, the Cubs are winning, right? They win the first 4 games with Nomar in the lineup. They're 5-1. They lose 2. They win. And I think after about a week, all of a sudden, giving Corey Patterson an automatic 5 at-bats a game started to seem, but Dusty would not relent until it was too late. I'm not blaming that for them falling out because there too many other things were, in play. But he was installed to lead off, and because of his hot first week there, stayed there longer than he should have, and a lot of damage was done, in my opinion. I don't know if they didn't really have a better alternative at leadoff, but
anybody was a better alternative.
Right. But that was Dusty's thing. It's like, all right, bro, I'm going to put the kid up there. I got Nomar batting second. I don't know how else the rest of the lineup worked, but from that point, really in retrospect, it was just such a disappointment. There was nothing fun about it. It should have been a fucking party. This is a team that was 5 outs from the World Series the year before. Like you said, they upgraded at first base. They tweaked this and that. They didn't really do much in the bullpen, but they're still a better team on paper. And then they get one of the best goddamn shortstops in the game, even though he was starting to slow down, didn't matter. And they spend the next 2 months just absolutely driving us crazy.
Well,
in spite of all that.
The lineup that day was Corey, Nomar, Moises, Sammy, Aramis, Derrek Lee, Grudzelanek, Baco.
Wow.
And then Greggie. Greggie probably should have hit 6.
That's a good lineup, even with Baco and Corey at the top.
Well, I mean, this is until the Theo Cubs.
Yeah. Yes.
This was the most talented team the Cubs had in our lifetimes.
it will be stated as a fact that this is the first time, and we're both in our 30s at this point, that the Cubs would merely have consecutive 500 seasons. That had never happened since like 1972.
I mean, because and obviously you have to correct for health, but if you look at the team, you had the pitching staff of Mark Prior, Kerry Wood, Carlos Zambrano, Greg Maddux, and Matt Clement. And then you had the lineup that had Derrek Lee and Ramos Ramirez, and you still had Sammy, and you had Moises, and then you ended up with Nomar, and then Barrett. They should have found they had a good enough offense. They should have had a real catcher. Should not have had that dunce back.
Convinced Damian Miller to come back or whatever. And
if you're going to play him, honestly, he probably should have ended up being the de facto leadoff hitter.
Barrett.
He's like a 350 on base guy, but freaking Corey they installed him as 325, and it went down from there.
Yes.
His numbers looked. These are numbers that Dusty would think were good. 272, 325, 432. The problem is 325 is bad for a leadoff hitter.
Yes.
And the whole thing is there's just so many strikeouts. It's like, don't put those at the top of your freaking lineup unless you want Nomar to bat with nobody on, with one out all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, so then
the bullpen really was the only real hole.
But after they got Nomar, they win that game against Philly. They go to Colorado and they sweep.
Yep.
And things are looking good. Then they go out to San Francisco and they lose the Friday game. Jason Schmidt beats Matt Clement. But then on Saturday, August 7th, with Tom Brenneman on the call for Fox.
Assuredly. Oh, that's when he got it.
Nice call. Greg Maddux wins his 300th game. Yep. And he one of those things where he only pitched 5. He did not pitch well. 5 innings, 7 hits, 4 runs, struck out 3, walked 3. And these are the guys that nailed it down for him. The Cubs pitched scoreless. How many hits they give up? Let's see. They had to cover 4 innings. They gave up 4 hits, but not more than 1 an inning. And the guys were John Lester, not that John Lester, the other John, the Iceman.
The one who
the very British spelling of Lester.
Yes, there's a street in the subdivision. I grew up in Elk Grove. I grew up on Wellington, but they're all named after British counties. But being American, we pronounced it Leicester. But John Lester, the first, pronounced it John Lester.
So John Lester, Kent Mercker, Mike Remlinger, Kyle Farnsworth, and LaTroy Hawkins. So LaTroy was on the mound for the final out of Greg Maddox's 300th.
How about that? Win. And I think he was a member of the Giants the next year when Maddox would get his 3,000th strikeout.
Yeah, also against the Giants.
Yeah.
Against Omar Vizquel. After a long rain delay, when the Cubs were no longer wearing numbers on their backs. Or numbers. They weren't wearing names. They were wearing numbers. It was only Ernie didn't get to wear numbers. They didn't get a name on the back.
In 04, right? That was like the one year they didn't have names on their backs. Is it? Yeah. It was kind of a weird. They first did it in 93, and then they peeled off for, but here's the thing.
Trying to be the Yankees.
Right. Well, but they were.
And the Red Sox don't wear names at home.
Right. But it was in 1993, the first year they put the names on. When we grew up, they didn't have the names on.
Right.
So just to recap and put it into context here about how this team is just slowly just fucking just farting around here. They get Nomar. They win 4 in a row. They sweep the Colorados, and then 3 successive series against West Coast teams. The first in San Fran, and then at home against San Diego and LA. They lose 2 out of 3, all 3. They lose 4 out of 6 at home against the Padres and Dodgers. I was in Vegas for that Dodgers series because I remember watching the closeout of the Saturday game where they won. But it's just this sort of slide. What are you doing just pissing away 4 out of 6 at home, when you're fighting for a wild card? It's ominous.
One last thing about Maddox's 300th win.
Oh, sorry.
No. Kyle Farnsworth, in his inning of relief, hit a giant. Do you know what giant he hit?
I don't.
A.J. Przinsky.
Oh!
So, fine.
Good on you. Good on you.
Yeah, so they They piss that away. Then they go to Milwaukee and they win. They lose the opener on Tuesday, August 17th. And then the Cubs catch fire. They win the next two in Milwaukee. They win 2 out of 3 in Houston. Milwaukee comes in and they sweep, and then they win again. So they won.
Well, they had a walk-off with Houston 4, 5, 6. But
they won 8 out of 9.
Right.
Everything.
And
all
so
right.
Now you're thinking,
they've
right.
righted the ship. Prior's back.
Yes, that's exactly it. We're convincing ourselves that they, that we were patient, right? We weren't giving up on this team. They're farting around. They pissed away the division, and then they've got 6 weeks to turn it around. We got plenty of time, like you said. Prior's back.
Well, and the only loss in that bunch was the walk-off loss to Houston, where the Cubs led 3-2 in the bottom of the 9th, and LaTroy.
Another LaTroy game.
You got to admit, though, he gave up hits to stars. One former Cub. Jose Vizcaino tied it with a single to left field, and then Jason Lane got a single to win the game for Houston. So, how are you supposed to get a 65-year-old Jose Vizcaino out or the great Jason Lane? I can excuse LaTroy there. That's fine.
The crown weighs heavy on LaTroy here. He's already pissed away a few games. Everything is just bad omens. We're seeing things that are just going to keep reoccurring here down the stretch. I will give LaTroy real quick credit here, though, because I do know that this happened and I can nail it. Saturday, September 11th. Ooh, sorry, it's on the anniversary. It was almost the anniversary of today. It was just recently, I guess 18 years ago, where LaTroy closed out a game that the Cubs came back late. Dempster got the win. I'm only bringing this up because this is the only time I've ever actually seen this on TV or otherwise. But in the bottom or the top of the 9th inning, to close out the game, all you're going to see in Baseball Reference is 3 straight strikeouts, and sure enough, you'll see that it would happen on 3 pitches to each batter. An immaculate inning. So sometimes LaTroy would really show, his potential. It almost would give you hope, even though in the back of your mind you're like,
in the All-Star game this year, Indians closer Emmanuel Clase came in to pitch, and he struck out the first guy on 3 pitches, and the first batter he got a borderline call called a ball. And he was pissed. Mm-hmm. And you're like, what are you so pissed about? And then he struck that guy out of the next 3 pitches and the last guy on 3 pitches.
Nice.
It's almost like he's like, fuck it, I'm going to get this. I'm going to throw 9 strikes. And I'm going to strike these 3 guys out. And if not and he was right, except for a bad call by the ump. But in fact, he was so mad. I was watching at home going like, holy shit, he's pissed.
I have to share this because we're talking about immaculate innings. This totally happened in Kerry Wood's first start in 02, and I may have brought it up when we talked about 02. It was in Cincinnati. He struck out the first 2 batters on 6 pitches, went 0-2 on the next batter, may or may not have been Ken Griffey Jr., and then threw a ball or whatever, and then fouled it off. And next thing you know, Kerry Wood got out of the inning, no runs, but the bases were loaded, and he threw about 30-some-odd pitches. But the first 8 were strikes. Anyway. But that I jumped ahead there just because we're talking about LaTroy shit in the tub. He did have that one moment, and I don't know, any other games that he, factored in down the stretch. But, you figure with that 8 out of 9 stretch, even though they followed up with 3 more straight losses to Houston heading into, Labor Day weekend, they're certainly done with the division. They're 71-59. That's not great we're disappointed, but we'll take it. We'll drag this dead carcass across the finish line if you motherfuckers can just get there, right? You're too talented not to. Just getting frustrating. It's getting frustrating. It was frustrating to live it the first time. It's frustrating to relive it.
So there was a game. My dad actually was at this game. Friday, August 27th. I think it's the only Major League Baseball game he ever went to by himself. He went because he went with him and my mom were in Chicago for something. Some kind of Disney collectible convention, I think.
Okay.
And no, it couldn't have been that because he would have gone to that because he loved to trade. He was like wheeler dealer with these fancy Disney collectibles. that Mom,
Sure.
Dad got into it and started researching prices and turned it into like his own stock trading.
His thing.
This had to be a scrapbooking convention because Dad wouldn't have wanted to have spent any time at it. So Mom was at it. So Dad's like, "Hey, the Cubs are. It's a Friday.
Yeah.
It's you're like it's a 2:20 start."
Right. See,
there.
Told you. Oh, so, wow! So they went back to
Dad
it.
went.
Apparently, just and experimenting with the 120.
He saw a game that will go down in at least it's. You don't remember the game, but you remember the aftermath. Everybody remembers this.
Is this Lance Burke, Fat Elvis?
Well, two things happened in this game. There's a lot in 2004. Multiple things would happen in games.
I remember Michael Barrett showing his ass by arguing with the Astros when he should have just shut up, maybe. But
so
that's
this
all
was
I got.
Friday, August 27th. The Cubs 71-57, and the Astros 65-63. It's like, well, we know the Astros aren't going to make the playoffs.
Bury him, and they would. That reminds me of the Brewers a couple times in the last 5 years, where the Cubs could have not only helped their own case, but buried the Brewers, and they didn't do it.
So the pitching matchup was Roy Oswalt against Kerry Wood, and it got out of hand right away. The Astros scored 4 runs on Wood in the first. The Cubs came back and got 2. So it was a wild 4-2. Both teams scored 2 runs in the third, but the Cubs fell behind. They ended up losing the game eventually, 15-7. Now, 2 things happened. In an early at bat, what inning was it? I have to look.
Somebody bat out of order again?
No, but you were right. Lance Berkman was up, and Kerry buzzed him, and Lance not only acted like he got hit, acted like he got hurt. Like they thought it looked like it. Kerry thought he hit him in the head. And Lance was laying on the ground, and Kerry even came over to see if he was okay. And Lance did this whole thing where he like barely could get to his feet and go to first. And on the fucking replay, it didn't hit him. It may have scared him because it was Kerry Wood fastball, but it didn't hit him. And that fucker acted like so. Later in the game, a Cub reliever decided he was going to retaliate, and he retaliated by hitting Roy Oswalt, and it was Kent Mercker.
Okay. That was Mercker.
Mercker gets thrown out of the game for hitting Oswalt, goes to the clubhouse where he hears the Fox Sports Net team of Chip Caray and Steve Stone talking about what he said, quote, a brilliant performance by Roy Oswalt. This is Roy's line. Roy pitched 8 innings, gave up 7 hits and 6 runs.
Brilliant performance?
Brilliant performance. So Mercker gets pissed. So when Steve Stone tells the story, the way Stone tells the story, Mercker called up to the press box to complain.
Correct. Yep.
What Mercker said he did was he talked to Cubs PR person at the time, Sharon Panazzo, and said, why don't you ask those 2 assholes how giving up 6 runs is a brilliant performance, and that Steve heard secondhand, not firsthand. So Steve then goes on the score later and talks about how this happened. Well, the Cubs the next day are going on a road trip, so Mercker goes up to him on the plane and says, "Hey, buddy, you know what the hell? Why are you pretending like I called the press box to talk to you? I didn't. I talked to the PR person." And Mercker claims that Mercker was an asshole, so who knows? The problem with this story is everybody involved in it is an asshole. Steve Stone's an asshole. Kent Mercker's an asshole. Which asshole are you going to believe? Mercker says that he didn't yell at Stone on the plane, but that Stone told people that he did. That instead of him basically telling him, hey, you were wrong, he was screaming and yelling at me on the plane.
So first of all, Stone says he called the press box. He called
Mercker claims he did. Mercker says
and now Stone says that he's screaming at him on the airplane.
And Mercker says he did. Now, who knows? Mercker, one of the 2 is lying, and it could be either one of them. We don't know.
Okay.
What Mercker did admit to, though, was on the road trip, the 2 of them ended up alone on the elevator together. And Mercker says he did yell at Steve then.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. Basically, because twice Steve had said that Mercker yelled at him when Mercker claimed he didn't. But who knows which one of these guys is right?
When Stone talked about Oswalt, it was having a masterful performance or whatever it was. Was it in any way related to like Mercker throwing at him, or was it just like Mercker threw at him? It's almost incidental. He gets ejected. He's in the clubhouse, and then having nothing to do with Mercker, he just happens to hear like Steve Stone mischaracterized Roy Oswalt's outing and that angered him. See, that is a pretty. It's obviously idiotic of Stone, and maybe because he hung around Chip Carey, who
I want to see who Mercker got to pitch to, because he didn't.
Chip Carey has hyperbole flowing through his blood, and so.
Okay, Mercker didn't get thrown out.
Right,
he got taken.
He didn't get thrown out.
And this is interesting who the last guy he faced was. So the first batter he faced was Oswalt, and he hit him. And Mercker says now that he hit him on purpose because he had by then the guys in the dugout knew that Lance had faked. And yes. I think he didn't. I think Lance was coming up later. I think Mercker's like, I don't know if I'm going to face Lance, so I'll just hit fucking Oswalt. So he hit him. Which,
perfect.
Honestly,
that makes sense.
That part's fine. I'm fine with that.
So
he hits him. He gets the Beige out, and then Beltran singles, and Biggio steals third, and Beltran steals second. So great. And then he walks Bagwell. Then Berkman comes up, but the bases are loaded. He can't hit him because the bases are loaded. But he throws a wild pitch, and then he ends up walking him. I wish he should have hit him then. He gets taken out for the Iceman. He goes up to he goes into the clubhouse.
Right.
And the TV's on. And,
but it wasn't a case of Stone criticizing Mercker for hitting. It was just happened to mention, which makes it more ridiculous that Mercker would get that upset. Yeah. His own performance was ass, and that he wants to all of a sudden be like Norman Chad and like critique Steve Stone's broadcasting acumen, not that he was even being attacked, just like he's not wrong. Right? Like, if they characterize Oswalt's start as good, they're obviously morons, but you're the fucking ball player. You're wasting your time, like, calling up, big old Sharon Panazzo and, like, complaining to her. Like, what? Like, that speaks to the heart of the matter. I think is still true after 18 years, that this team was just unhinged and unaccountable. And they could just, I don't know, do whatever they wanted.
And it ends up getting, in a terrible season, it ended up having a happy outcome for us
because of events starting here. Yeah. We got rid of Chip Carey first and foremost.
So Jim Hendry ended up having to get involved in this, which is the last thing he wanted to do. He ended up having to play like peacemaker between Kent Mercker and the broadcast team,
and he has no dominion over the broadcast. And he's got to help smooth it over.
Right. Stone always claimed that Hendry was clearly on Mercker's side. Chip and Steve felt like they weren't being backed by the franchise.
Yeah, you're fucking announcers. So Stone at this
point, Chip was getting all kinds of criticism because he sucked at his job. He was awful.
Right.
Most of the fans hated him. There was a blog out there that the guy around the blog was just hammering Chip every day. It was just relentless. I don't know who that guy was. Me.
Yes.
And at some point late in the season, the Cubs told Chip that, this is the last year of your contract and you're not coming back. So you might want to go see if you can find gainful employment somewhere else. And he ended up going to Atlanta, and then Steve ended up getting upset the way Chip was treated, and he quit too.
Well, I mean, at this point, we talked about Stoney in the beginning. He was a total straight man, a nasally sounding straight man to Harry Carey. Never really seemed to be very, gutsy or, he'd be a good insight, but he didn't really have much of a personality. Over the course of I guess the 20 some odd years, he sort of, eventually put on his big boy pants, and he was big boy pants, but he was by 2004, he was a little bit full of himself, frankly. Right? Yes. Really believing his own bullshit.
Everybody been telling him how great he was, and he believed it.
Yeah.
So they lose that game. And then they lose the Saturday game, and they lose the Sunday game. So they don't just not bury the Astros; they throw them a lifeline.
That's what the Cubs have done with the Brewers.
The Astros are now back in the wild card race when they should have been put out of their misery. And that makes it even more ridiculous that Mercker was throwing a fit. They had far bigger fish to fry than a fucking argument with the announcers.
Yep.
They go to Montreal and they win 3 out of 4. No, they win 2. Well, they went 2 out of 3, and then Montreal chases them back to Wrigley. So they played them 6 games in a row. 3 in Montreal and then 3 at Wrigley. And
the last moment of silence for the last 3 games the Cubs would ever have played in Montreal.
They won the last one, and in 11 innings, and LaTroy got the win.
Wow.
Then they came back and lost 2 out of 3 to him. Then they played a very strange doubleheader. On Friday, September 10th, they played the Marlins in a doubleheader. And one of the games should have been a Marlin home game.
Cubs batted first at Wrigley Field?
No, they didn't. They don't. Major League Baseball doesn't let you do that.
Oh, okay.
They just basically give the Cubs an extra home game.
Gave the Cubs a home game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because a 3-game set, we could probably find it all becomes really important because
I
Cubs ended up
the rain. LaTroy's immaculate inning. That must have been the same week. Oh no, wait. There's a whole. Wait. So these games that are at Florida are actually not at Florida.
Those were actually in Florida. So the Cubs were supposed to play. The Marlins ended up coming to Chicago.
They got an extra game,
and I think they played. Maybe
Friday
they played the
doubleheader.
Expos. They played somebody. They played a 3-game series at U.S. Cellular. Then they were supposed to come play the Cubs anyway, and they played a doubleheader. One of those was just to make up one of the Hurricane out games. Then the Cubs had to go there on the 20th of September to play a doubleheader to make up the other two.
Correct, and they split them. But that's right. They had a 4-game weekend series. The first 2 were a doubleheader set on a rare Friday doubleheader.
And I remember thinking, I can't tell on. I mean, I could if I took a little more time. But when the games got rained out in Florida, I remember thinking that the Cubs could use. Maybe there was only the one day. Maybe they got the September 9th off when they weren't gonna. But I remember thinking the Cubs needed a break. This was good timing for them and it ended up being terrible timing because the 2 doubleheaders ended up adding to a slog at the end of the season where the Cubs ran out of fucking gas. And I think a big part of it was having to play all those games.
But they did have a 5...
well, no, we're going to get into it. There's one pitcher in particular who finally started pitching well, and Dusty couldn't stop fucking pitching him until he had nothing left, and he ended up blowing the season.
The original Florida series must have been between September 1st and September 6th.
So they got 5 days off. 4 days off.
And it probably much needed because they just lost 4 out of 5. Right. So actually, I think that's actually, that worked to their advantage, frankly. So
I don't know that it did because from the 10th of September.
Well, then it wouldn't have mattered.
Until the 3rd of October.
Right. But then plowing through those post-Labor Day games wouldn't have been any more advantageous. They could have pissed those away.
They had 2 doubleheaders in there. They had 1 day off. The last 24 days of the season. They played 25 games in 24 days.
Why don't they bitch about it like the 2019 Cubs?
Well, it doesn't help.
I know. But fuck it. I mean, all right, yeah, so you're playing Florida at that time. Hey, they shouldn't have been in that position anyway, right? They should have been futzing around. 13 games over 500 in September came in to begin with. They were much too good. So they made their bed.
All right, so they get through that. From the second game of the doubleheader, now they've got all these games in a row. And they go 1, 2.
Eight and 2.
They go 13
12 and 3. Yeah.
They go 13 and 3, and you think, all right, we're in great shape. The 13th win was a come-from-behind win at Shea Stadium against the Mets.
Derrek Lee had a game-winning hit in the top of the 9th, I want to say. A single.
I felt like
I remember driving around and listening to that game. I was living in the city. And it felt like they had gotten over the hump now, right? Like, all the fits and starts of these last 2, ever since that June series in St. Louis, and they've been in a rut. They did have one nice winning streak, but now we're there. We're rounding into form. We got Mark Prior back. We got Kerry Wood. We're 21 games over 500. We're in the, I believe, right?
Yeah.
They're in the pole position.
They have a 1.5 game lead for the wild card.
Yep.
Over the Giants and 2.5 over Houston.
It's like, finally, what a long slog. It was very hard, but we're in this position now. That's, the end is in sight. In spite of all the difficulty and adversity we've had, we've played under our level, but there's been some grace. And now that we have 10 days left in the season, right? 1 week, basically. Let's close it out. So let's go to Saturday, folks.
Well, before that, I was going to say that Houston, because we were talking about how the Cubs could put them out of their misery.
Well, and then they let them sweep them at home.
They win that game on that Friday. And then from then on, they went.
What game? The Friday at Houston.
No, the one we just talked about.
Oh, I got you. The Mets game. The Mets game.
No. What are you? No.
The Friday Mets game.
Talking about Houston.
Okay.
because Houston's only 2.5 games behind the Cubs now on that. With the Cubs had won that game, but I'm talking about the Royals. Well, the thing we just spent 20 minutes talking about.
Right.
And we had mentioned that on that day, that was the series where the Cubs could have put them out of their misery. They were 65 and 63. They went 27-7 the rest of the way. So the Cubs are going the Astros. The Cubs are going 13-3, and the Astros are winning every day, too, basically. So they're still not getting. They're not gaining on. They're not extending their lead. So these are still important. But they win that game against the Mets, and now they've got the final stretch of their season. The Cubs is all bad teams. Well, it's not all bad teams. They're going to finish with the Braves, but you figure by then the Braves have already. The Braves aren't going to worry about those wins, and you should wrap it up by then anyway. So they play that game against the Mets on the Saturday. It's Mark Prior, right?
I believe so. Todd Walker hit a nice big homer at one point that should have been big insurance. Was it Prior?
Yeah, it was Prior.
Yes.
Prior pitches 7 2/3, gives up 4 hits, no runs, strikes out 5. And the Cubs are up 3-0. Going into the bottom of the 9th.
They are on a roll. Yeah, 3-0 thanks to, I think it was Walker. Yeah, Todd Walker, 2-run homer off of Heilman, and then a bases-loaded walk to Moises Alou in the top of the 8th that Sammy could have really dented the game afterwards, but he struck out and Nomar grounded out. But still, 3-0, top of the 9th. And that's I should say that, let's point this out. In the bottom of the 8th, Mark Prior comes out. So he's got a 3-0 lead. Victor Diaz gets a hit, but then Prior strikes out former Yankee Gerald Williams. Wilson Delgado grounds out. Prior commits the mortal sin of walking a young David Wright. 2 runners on. So let's go to Ryan Dempster, who's just been, the manifestation of Jim Henry's reclamation project. And we're thinking, hey, this is good. He'd been pitching for a couple weeks. Been pitching pretty good. He was, came up with the Florida Marlins in '98 and gave up a 900-foot homer to Sammy Sosa the month that he hit 20 homers. And then Dempster went to the Reds and had some value because he was a deadline deal. Then he blew out his arm. And so Henry picks him up. He rehabs and he starts coming into games in August and seems, all right, this is a good option because we don't really trust LaTroy either. And we don't have Joe Borowski anymore. And sure enough, in the bottom of the 8th, our guy, Ryan Dempster, comes in and induces future Hall of Famer Mike Piazza to ground out to short. You know why? Because he threw the ball over the fucking plate.
Yeah, so
and he gets out of the inning. And now, okay, that's our closer. He's going to close out the net because LaTroy was never intended to be a closer. He was intended to be insurance for a closer.
It's not just that. So LaTroy, from the time the schedule got, condensed in fact, he pitched in one of the games of the doubleheader against the Marlins. From the 11th of September to the 24th, he pitched in 9 games. So 9 games in 13 days. He had pitched. He pitched 10 innings, given up 5 hits, 1 run, struck out 10, and walked 2. He had an 0.90 ERA in those games. But he had also pitched on the 20th, the 21st, the 23rd, and he'd pitched the night before. And this was a day game after a night game. And so Dusty's like, we're not going to LaTroy.
We're not going to go to him.
We don't need to do that. He's exhausted.
And this is a great opportunity.
Well.
Right. And this is a great opportunity. Here's Henry's gamble, not a low stakes gamble. But here's the guy that might be our closer. And sure enough, Dempster would prove to be an effective closer for a couple of years. And he had the arm for it. And I think the long range plan was this guy could be our closer, but this guy could be our closer now. And here he is. Yeah. He's healthy. Here's his opportunity. Right? And he, like I said, he induces Piazza to end the inning. And but you're right. LaTroy is done. Right? So Dempster, can you cut a guy a fucking break and let him enjoy his day off?
And look they got a 3-run lead, and look who he's going to face.
I know the 2 guys he walked.
He's got Todd Zeile, then Eric Valent, Jason Phillips, and if anybody gets on, Jeff Keppinger, and then, God forbid, 2 guys get on, Victor Diaz.
Now,
certainly, Ryan Dempster can get through that without giving up 3 runs, right?
He's got a 3-run fucking lead. So Jason Valent, Jason Phillips and Eric Valent. I've looked this up because it drives me nuts that Dempster flies under the radar. So many fans forget things like this. Eric Valent and Jason Phillips, both of them were literally out of the league within 24 months, maybe even 12. I looked it up at one point.
So was Victor Diaz. I don't know if Victor Diaz ever played a game after.
Well, that comes from LaTroy. I'm focusing on Dempster's inability.
But I'm talking about the guys who
of all of
the
them,
Cubs here. So he strikes out Zeal to start the inning. So now it's just
one proven hitter.
You just have to get 2 outs without giving up 3 runs. Can you do
two
that?
2 banjo hitters that are going to be out of the league in a year.
Yep.
And what does he do instead?
Valenti walks on 5 pitches.
Unreal.
Then Phillips, he gets to a full count and walks him.
And Dusty's like, fuck this. You can't blame Dusty.
So LaTroy with his arm hanging down by his knee. And I'm no LaTroy defender, but this is not a position that you should put him in. He faces Keppinger, gets him to fly out. So it's like, all right, fine. All you have to do is get Victor Diaz out, and the Cubs win, and the lead stays at 2.5, and you're coming home. You got all those games with the Reds. Everything's looking great.
Mm-hmm.
And Victor Diaz hits a 3-run homer to deep right field.
Oppo. I remember where I was in my apartment on Cullum Avenue, right by the Celtic Crown at Western.
I was watching this on a game cast. I was working a football game, and I was in the press, and I was refreshing, and just expecting to see, and then it did that weird thing in the old game cast where you refresh, and the batters changed, and I'm like, what happened? Look up, and it's 3-3. It's like, because I assume, what did he do? Walk Victor Diaz? Like, no, he had a 3-run homer.
I did not stick around for extra innings. My wife and I went for a bike ride and drove down to rode our bikes down to Lincoln Park and watched for Napoleon Dynamite. And I saw through a bar window that the Cubs had not won it.
Well, they rallied in the top of the 10th. They had 2 on with Sammy up. He grounded into a double play off Ricky Batalico.
Yeah, Sammy was really struggling down the stretch.
Mike Wirtz got through the bottom of the 10th. Honestly, why did you just go to Wirtz? Bruce Miles would have. He loved Mike Wirtz and his slider to death.
Yeah, it was decent.
The top of the 11th, the Cubs tried to scratch a run across against Jae Wong Soo. Do you remember Jae Wong Soo? No, nobody does.
No.
But how about the guys who batted for the Cubs in the top of the 11th? This is an immortal group. Calvin Murray, Jose Macias, then Michael. We haven't even talked about the next guy, about the guy after Michael Baer, the guy who almost saved that season, and certainly
the next
season.
The next year, yeah.
Oh, we'll talk about Neffy because Neffy, they was a post waiver pickup, and he went nuts for the Cubs.
He went nuts, and he carried it through.
Yeah, so Michael Baer gets a ground rule double, so Neffy's up with a runner on second. He can be a hero. No. And he grounds out to the shortstop.
But the fact that you're 1 week from the end of the season and you're hoping to make the playoffs and you send up 4 batters in a row that are Calvin Murray, Jose Macias, Michael Barrett, but Nafy Perez. 3 of those 4.
I'm sure they had all. Did they all come in on defense when the Cubs had the big lead? Why are they even in? I don't get it.
It's not worth.
So then in the bottom of the 11th, the immortal Craig Brazel,
another nobody,
hits a home run off Kent Mercker and the Cubs lose.
Okay, let's pick ourselves back up. That's a tough loss. It doesn't have to be the end of it. We got Kerry Wood going tomorrow. Kerry Wood has never had a season in which he has finished under 500. We're okay. All right. We still got our guys. That's a tough loss. We've been playing really good baseball, and it didn't work out. So Kerry comes into the game 8-7. In the very first fucking inning, he gives up 3, walks in a run, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he got a hit by pitch with the immortal Craig Brazel scoring. He walks in Gerald Williams. But he gets out of it. And then in the bottom of the first, no, it was the top of at some point I thought Moises Alou, late in the game, Moises Alou may have gotten ejected it was just frustrating because it was like we had that game and then Wood just shits the time. It started to really get frustrated with Wood because it's like, pick us up. You couldn't pick us up last year, when some douchebag Notre Dame grad in a turtleneck, had to grab a souvenir. I granted he might have been out of gas then. Granted he's always hurt. But it's like we just lost a heartbreaking game. And then you fucking come out here and you walk the first batter, Jose Reyes, and let him steal. You give him a hit. You give him a few hits. You hit a guy, hit 2 guys in a row. You motherfucker. God damn it. I know you won the 2 games in Atlanta, but Christ, we really could have used you there. But the Cubs, that was it, though. I will say for Kerry, he settled down. All right, so maybe feelings are high. And the Cubs chip away, but they could never even tie the game. And I do remember late in the game that Alou came up in a situation that, a clutch hit would have been used. I'm pretty sure he got called out on a 3-2 pitch. I could be wrong. I'm not really seeing much of Alou in this game. I don't know. Yeah, at the end of the fifth, and the bases were loaded, but there's no indication that somebody was in to replace him. So he may not have gotten ejected.
No, he was batting in the eighth. I think he just threw a tantrum.
And you know what else happened this day that was not fun? Late in the game against the Minnesota Vikings, Bears' second-year quarterback Rex Grossman got injured, and we saw a few snaps from Jonathan Quinn, who would then be our quarterback for the next few weeks. Yeah. I just know that those happen on the same day. I had to mention it. But so back-to-back, tough, like a heartbreaking loss, and then just an really frustrating loss when you can't afford to give away losses. But still, right? Where are the Cubs at the end of the day?
They come home, and so they got their series with the 4 games against the Reds, the hapless Reds, and the Cubs are a half game up over the Giants and a game and a half over the Astros. So
still
just keep winning, and you're going to the playoffs. That's all you have to do. Take care of business.
Forget about New York.
And the first game, they do. Nomar drives in 2 runs in the top of the first, and they go on. They cruise to a 12-5 win behind Carlos, and Carlos was amazing down the stretch.
Is that right? He was. I think I remember we looked that up before.
He was amazing, and Greggie was good until this. Greg had their 2 best pitchers down the stretch were Zambrano and Maddox until Greg shits the bed against the Reds.
Okay.
Carlos in September that year started 6 games. He went 4-0. The Cubs won 5 of the 6 games.
Okay.
He had a 1.96 ERA, struck out 33, and walked 12. He was really good.
Wow.
And he was still a kid. How old was Carlos in 2004?
Jesus, 23, 24?
Yep. That was his first All-Star year, was 2004.
Yeah, I saw that he was 16-8 after that game against the Reds.
I need to give you Neffy's stats for 2004. He
was awesome in September.
He played 23 games for the Cubs in 2004. He hit .371 with a 400 on base and a .548 slug. He an OPS plus of a 141.
Yeah. One of those curses where you do that well and for a short period of time, just like when Corey Patterson was batting leadoff and it was really hot for 10 days. And you're like, oh, let's bet the farm on this.
And he would have been on the postseason roster because he got cut by the Giants on August 17th, signed with the Cubs on August 19th. So he was on the roster on the 31st of August. So he was playoff eligible. So he'd have been. I'm sure he'd have been the World Series MVP.
He could have saved the World Series in addition to saving the 2005 season.
I mean, he'd already homered the Cubs into the playoffs once in his career.
6 years earlier,
he could just do it again.
You're right. Maddox shit the tub the next day.
Yes.
But where were they at the end of that day? They were still in the wild card spot. They're actually tied.
I used to
Maddox
I compared this whole end of the season was like a slow motion car wreck. You just the Cubs would lose and you think, all right, they've fallen out of it, and they would still somehow be barely clinging. Yeah, they were a flat-footed tie with the Giants.
Flat-footed tie after Maddox.
Half game over the Astros.
This is where it gets really rough, and I think this is where we get to that Mark Prior game, or not. Yeah, right?
Yep.
So Prior, here's Prior, poor guy. He was our golden child. He just puts us on his shoulders the year before, comes this close to the pennant, and then he's just not himself this year, but he's okay down the stretch. No, I'm wrong. Glendon Rush. I'm wrong. Totally wrong.
The Cubs have to throw Glendon Rush out on the 29th of September. He makes the start, but he's facing the great. What the hell am I? Am I in the wrong thing?
Well, Luke Hudson was
Glendon Rush against Luke Hudson, and Glendon 6 1/3, 4 hits, 1 run. And you think, oh, that ought to be enough to win. Luke Hudson 6 innings, 4 hits, 1 run. Imagine him pitch for pitch.
The bat's turtled. So what happened? How did the Cubs take the lead here? No, No, it's top of the ninth. Oh, Moises gets a sac fly, a little small ball. Scores Corey. So, yeah, the Cubs are offense struggling in this game, but they have a 2-1 lead after 7. They have a 2-1 lead after 8. And, Dempster get pitched in here after Rush came out and got an out. Good for you. But, Dusty's not going to put him back in the closer spot because of what happened in New York. He's got to go back to LaTroy. And LaTroy, like you said, is already a little bit out of gas. Cubs take a 2-1 lead into the ninth, right? Yep.
Yes, and he's got to face. He actually has real batters he's got to face this time. Sean Casey, Adam Dunn, former Sox star D'Angelo Jimenez.
And Padre, who has, D'Angelo Jimenez is involved in, never mind. There was some pain with him.
But this is going to be easy.
Right.
Casey grounds out, Dunn strikes out, Cub fans on their feet, everybody clapping. Cubs are going to win 2-1, and D'Angelo Jimenez triples.
It's down the right. Yep.
Sammy running around, running into the wall, falling down. With Sammy.
Exactly.
So then the guy who Jim Hendry had tried to trade for years, the guy with the enormous ears who has the word ear right in the middle of his name, Austin Kearns, who had never done shit.
Before or since.
Hits a double, scores Jimenez, ties the game. But like everything else that the 2004 Cubs did, the death couldn't come quickly. LaTroy gets out of it. So now we go to Cubs can still win it.
They got to drag it out.
Gabe White comes in to pitch, and he's got to face the one name keeps popping up in here a lot. This reason
Jose Macias.
We have no love for Dusty. In the bottom of the ninth, he has to face Michael Barrett, Jose Macias, and Corey
Once
Patterson.
again. Critical situation, and you're setting up your
fly
bad
ball,
boys.
line out, strikeout. Now the Farnes is in the top of the 10th. Reds go down 1-2-3. He strikes out Darren Bragg, Javier Valentin, and Felipe Lopez. Todd Van Poppel comes in to pitch for the Reds.
Former Cub at this point.
Yeah, he'd been really good for them in 0-1.
Yes, he was.
Nomar walks, Moises lines out, Aramis pops out, and Derrek Lee flies out. Farnes is still in.
Yep.
He gives up a single to Juan Castro, gets a double play with Sean Casey, strikes out Adam Dunn. The Farnes is kicking ass. All right, bottom 11. Surely the Cubs will score here because they got Sammy and then Neffy.
Well, where are all the good players we were talking about at the beginning of the year? Like, hey, we got Derrek Lee, we got Ramirez. Like, where are? Well, they were in the previous inning, I guess. But
so Sammy singles. Neffy bunts him to second. Best player on the team's got him bunting. That's way to go. Michael Barrett grounds out, and the Farnes is due up. So who comes up? Ben Grieve. They trade Andy Pratt to get him, just for this moment. And he grounds back to the pitcher. Just John Riedling. How are you supposed to hit John Riedling?
If Harry were alive, he would have said, little tap.
So now we go to the Iceman. And he's in to face D'Angelo Jimenez walks, Austin Kearns homers.
Big old ears.
And the Reds are up 4-2. They almost scored a lot more. Larkin struck out. Darren Bragg singled. Javier Valentin walked. Then Felipe Lopez popped out. And then Juan Castro. Mike Wirtz cleaned up again. Hey, Dusty, maybe you should have just started with him.
Well, Wirtz, a little. So, I'm seeing what happened in the bottom of the 12th. Like you said, the Cubs cannot just get it over with. They have to drag it out.
He walked. Corey Patterson walked.
Wow.
That should have ended. That was the sign of the apocalypse. Nomar reaches on an error. So now you got 2 on. Moises grounds into a double play. Scores Corey. Aramis singles. Derrek Lee strikes out. The Cubs lose.
Ouch. Tough loss. Real tough loss. There are only, 6 days left in the season.
Cubs lose 4-3, and now they're fallen out, right?
I believe so. I was trying to find the standings to a disinterested Reds team.
Houston has passed them.
Yeah, because the Cubs could not put them away. Yeah, so at the end of the day, now the Cubs are 1/2 game behind Houston, but that's okay. We got the Reds again. All right, let those fuckers enjoy it. All right, we're done with this. We gave them 2. It's embarrassing, and it's embarrassing that we have to settle for a split. But we just got to do it before the Braves come to town.
We got Mark Prior. Everything's going to be fine.
The offense is going to score some runs.
And Mark Prior, it's sad that at the age of 23, he turns back the clock.
That's exactly it.
This
Just read his
grizzled
line.
old veteran of 23 with all of his arm injuries goes
Just
9
read that
innings,
pitching line.
gives up 3 hits, 1 run, walks 1 guy, and strikes out 16. He basically throws the Cubs on his back and says, "All right, you remember how we failed last year? Fuck it, we're going to do it this time."
I'm not going to leave it.
And the Cubs facing Aaron Harang also
Who was
managed
admittedly their
1
good pitcher.
run.
Yeah.
Aaron Harang 4 hits in 7 innings.
Pryor committed the sin of giving up 1 run in the 7th after the Cubs had scored, and that was it. And again, guess who tied the game up?
It was an Austin Kearns home run. Yes, Austin Kearns killed the Cubs in the final week of the season.
He did. And then, of course, just for good measure, the guy who wins it in the 12th, long after Pryor's gone, longtime Cub killer, and Roman Maroney lookalike, or that's his brother Jose. But the Reds had a pudgy little fucking backup catcher that constantly, I just felt like,
Jose Valentin was the Iraqi tank commander.
Right, or Freddie Mercury, if you want to insult the Sox fan or like whatever. But Javier was a chubby little brother. Looked a lot like him. And of course,
so he homers off of Remlinger, or doubles, scores Adam Dunn somehow. Adam scores from... Oh, he's on third base. That's how he scored on a double.
No, off of Farnsworth.
Javier that's right. Remlinger started the inning. He gave up the hit to Dunn, and then they went...
Remlinger could not retire the lefty Dunn.
Right, and so then instead of leaving him in to face the righties, which Remlinger was far better against righties and lefties because of his changeup. Dusty never figured that shit out, ever. And he would take him out against righties and put him in against lefties and couldn't understand why it didn't work, and he could never learn.
Although Farnsworth finally did solve Kearns by striking him out, but then... but he can't retire Javier Valentin.
No. So the bottom of the 12th, Jose Macias. Singles. Corey strikes out. Nomar bunts, and Nomar sacrifices.
Oh,
so
come on!
He gets Macias to second. Aramis walks.
He had to be bunt for a hit, and
I would hope. And they gave him a generous official score. Gave him.
He tried to drag him. He tried to bunt for a hit, and they got him out. And then in that case, you still get credited with a sacrifice because my mother of God.
But anyway, so Aramis walks. So Moises is up. The tying run at second. Go ahead, run on first, and he flies out to center, and the Cubs lose.
And that's kind of the season, right? Because I remember when the Braves came in for the season-ending series, the Friday game, it felt like a funeral. It felt like it was over. Not just being melodramatic. It was like mathematically now. It was like, oh, fuck, you guys are fucked. You're more than a game behind, right? Were they a game? I have to pull it up. Pretty sure they're more. If you're more than a game behind with the 3-game season going on, then you are pretty. You're obviously at the mercy of everyone else. Yeah. So actually, what happens is they're only a game out, but San Francisco is now jumped ahead of them.
Yeah.
So
they're third. They have 2 teams ahead of them with 3 games to go, and those 2 teams are not. And you're not playing either of those teams.
Yes,
which means you're relying on 2 other teams to beat the teams ahead of you. It's bad enough to need one team to win, but now you need 2 to do it for you.
They are only 1 game behind them, but the fact that it's 2 teams is really the issue. But they had control of their own destiny going 1 week earlier.
It's Kerry Wood against Mike Hampton.
On Friday. I remember listening to this game when I was at work. It doesn't even matter.
No, and sure enough, the Cubs end up down 5-1 going into the bottom of the 9th.
Yeah.
And they stage one last rally. Nomar singles. Sammy grounds out. Todd Walker pinch hits for Grudzelanek. And he singles. Nomar goes to second. Ben Grieve hits a double. It scores Nomar and Walker. Jose Macias.
Oh, wow.
Of course, Jose Macias is playing. There's a wild pitch while he's batting.
Way too much Jose Macias.
How about this? So the final run scored in the game. Jose Macias drives in Calvin Murray. But then Corey strikes out, and Derrek Lee grounds out, and the Cubs lose 5-4, and it really is over.
Probably I think they're
Now they're 2 games behind both the Astros and the Giants with 2 games to go.
So they're still not mathematically eliminated.
They don't get them eliminated till the last day. No, they get eliminated on Saturday. Because Saturday they
Because
get
all the-
eliminated. Sunday we finally get some good news.
Yes. Yeah, a few things happened that Sunday.
Yeah,
You're right. So, yeah, they lose 8-6 after they give up 3 in the top of the 8th on Saturday.
Yeah, they blow a 6-2 lead against the Braves and lose 8-6.
And at the end of the standings that day, now they are they're still the 2 teams ahead of them, but now they are 3. They are eliminated. The 3.
Jose Macias is now your starting center fielder.
Oh my God, it just gets worse.
Jose's stat line for the year: 268, 292, 376. He's playing center and he's leading off. Of course, he's leading off because he's a center fielder. You have to lead off if you're the center fielder on Dusty's team.
That whole thing is like a giant fuck you.
And that's the one game Carlos does not. It's Carlos's last start, and he does not pitch well. He gives up 5 runs in 5 innings.
Well, because he broke from just the weight of carrying them. He
still managed to throw 120 pitches in 5 2/3.
Yeah.
Way to go, Dusty. That's great.
Yeah, so they were eliminated. They were definitely done then because they're 3 behind Houston, and they pulled away from San Fran.
They're eliminated. It's over.
It's over. And
why the hell would anybody tune in to the Sunday game? But I could.
Well,
I did, and there was news at the very beginning.
Well, there's a few things going on. Remember too now because Sammy Sosa shows up for his last day of work too.
Yep. Yeah.
For the last time.
3 big things happen on this day. 3 happen because 1 doesn't happen until later. So the broadcast starts, and Chip announces that he is leaving, and he's going to go announce with his old man.
Yep.
His old man dead.
Skip.
Yeah, his old man's still alive.
He is now.
Right.
No, his old man's dead now.
He's going to Fox Sports South or whatever it is. He's going to announce for the Braves. So finally, a little good news. Sammy's not in the lineup. Sammy leaves a little early.
Well, how could he push Jose Macias aside?
Who played? Let's see. Who played? Probably Ben Grieve, right?
Holly.
Jason DuBois. Jason DuBois played right field. Sammy leaves a little early. The guys find out, and after the game, Sammy's boombox in the clubhouse destroyed.
Well, he didn't need it. He already left.
Right. And in the offseason, Sammy would be traded.
Sammy's last game
to the Baltimore Orioles. So Sammy's last game was the day when they got eliminated.
Yeah.
The day before.
Yeah. Really strange ending to a pretty interesting career there, I guess. By the way, before we really tie it up and eulogize his team, I thought about Hollandsworth. Of course, Hollandsworth was not playing for Sammy in September because I mentioned earlier how much Xavier Hollandsworth was, but he was also an asshole in the same year because he had some weird, unusual, like massive shin injury.
He had a nerve entrapment in his shin.
And so after his hot streak where he really like kept the Cubs buoyed in Sosa's absence and actually, had a lot of big hits. And, oh, my God, thank God. Talk about a guy that's really saving the season. Then the game against the White Sox on a Friday or Saturday, I don't know if it was a Comiskey or Wrigley, he hits the ball off a shin guard.
I remember, I can still see it.
Completely unprotected by any sort of a shin guard apparatus. And didn't play again that season. And just like I'm mad at him because he got our hopes up.
Well, think about how big a loss could it be. It was the 27th of June. And the 27th of June, Todd Hollandsworth was hitting .318 with a .392 on base and a .547 slugging.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, he's playing out of that. Well, of course he is, but he'd been Rookie of the Year. He'd been a good player. There was a
good player.
He was the Cubs needed 4 outfielders, and he was going to be one of the 4, and he was going to play a lot. And he was a left-handed bat that they didn't have. They wouldn't have had fucking Jose Macias. Well, they would have, because Dusty probably would have found a way to play Jose Macias.
No, but you're right.
But honestly. Dusty would have played him. He was a veteran. He loved him. Those are his veterans, dude.
And that's one that's always haunted me too. Like not having Hollandsworth because of his own fucking absolute lack of self-awareness or just his total idiocy. Yeah, you're right. I would have been much preferred to have than that flat Sam of Kelvin Murray. And I mean, I'm astounded at all the guys that were taking plate appearances there in September. So
it was his last. That was his last good year in the big leagues. He was not good in 2005 for the Cubs. Got traded to the Braves for the playoff push. Hit .171 for them. Spent a year in Cleveland where he had 237, and then played only 34 games for the Reds in 06, and he was done.
Yeah, so barely, essentially a 10-year career.
He has a World Series ring for the Cubs.
Yes, because he slid home in that 8th inning. He scored a run in that 8th inning.
No, he has a World Series ring for the Cubs.
Oh, for the Cubs. Why? Because he
was one of the on the announcing team.
Good for Todd Hollandsworth. Would have been nice if he fucking considered putting on a goddamn shin guard, because we could have used him in September. Cubs did finish the season with a win, of course.
They did.
And Greggie got it. Yeah.
Cubs won 89 wins. All that talent, they only won 89 games.
Still a game better than the year before, but
how about this? So you talk about, they all say the Pythagorean win-loss, which is runs scored over runs allowed. It tells a lot about a manager if you're over or under your projected win total. The 2004 Cubs were Pythagoras says they were supposed to be 94 and 68. They would have comfortably been the wild card team by what, like 3 games?
I believe so. Yeah, 94 wins. Yes, at least 2.
Yeah, these people who wonder why we hate Dusty so much. Well, there's a reason.
Yeah, and like I said, I've gotten over it since 2016. But you make a good point too. Like just the path of destruction. I mean, starting with Prior, and I know it's not all on him. There's organizational blame to go around, but that talent. I mean, I think we prefaced it pretty well.
We talked with the Prior thing though. Even if he did nothing else, I mean, he rode him and Wood too hard down the stretch in 03. But the Prior thing, it's them running into Marcus Giles and then leaving him in the game to pitch. That's the most unforgivable fucking thing ever.
It is. But I will say this, that if they had the instinct on that and shut him down, we don't have all 3. We might have a great Prior, might not, right? But just to leave him in the game was obviously.
Well, but I've always thought just the fact that shouldn't you have at least gotten him medically checked out?
Right.
Like just the idea that they're like, how you feel? Oh, I'm okay. Okay, good. Just stay in and pitch.
But you remember,
we saw he couldn't get through the next inning. We did that in 03.
Right. True.
And then of course the scan. Cubs are so good at reading.
Well, but that was a scan that was done towards the end of his career that showed that there was.
Well, no, I mean clearly they checked it out after. Yeah. Like, oh, he's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, come on. Is this not around the time? When did Sandy Crum get fired as trainer? Remember, you wrote an article called The Dopes or something. That would have been 05, 06. It's all part of the same morass.
Was that him or was that the guy that Rosner loved so much?
I thought it was Sandy Crum. I don't know.
It was the other guy.
Tony Garofalo?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or Tony Gravenino, either one. They should all go.
Tony Gravenino.
Yeah. Garofalo.
It was.
I think it is Tony Garofalo.
Wow, well, that goes back to the 80s. They had John Fierro, the 89 Cubs, was the trainer.
Was it?
But they had
who was the one? Oh, John Fierro. Okay, I was trying to think of the one. Remember, Rosner wrote this long thing about how could the Cubs do that? And oh my God, what a tragedy! And they don't treat people right. And blah blah blah.
Oh, I don't remember.
I bet it was Fierro.
Okay. Yeah, you wrote something, but this is that period of time where they're doing towel drills. They were swapping out trainers every year. They were misdiagnosing people. It was just real haphazard management of some real prized investments.
Oh, here it is. I wrote an article on September 7th, 2011 called "Create Your Own Barry Rosner Column."
Oh, that's when he stopped talking to you.
Yes, blocked me, and I became persona non grata. But all you had to do to fill it in was talk about the loser fans that the Canucks have. Talk about Jay Cutler shrugging. Catch up with John Fierro or Anthony Molina. Remember that was
the guy who got hit by Ben Christensen.
Yeah,
nice.
Anyway, it went on. And part 2.
So you're right.
Part 2 was you had to quote Sanjay H., the smartest GM not in baseball today. Part 3 was you went over to the Sports Pickle and stole some of their headlines. I mean, he used to do that. And then he always quoted Greg Cody from the Miami Herald. Greg's actually really funny. He's on the Dan Le Batard stuff. But it was always weird. And then you end up, of course, you finish up with an Alex Kaysberg joke.
You're right. Right. Watch it. He might sue us for mentioning his name, by the way.
I didn't
So
say
you're
the
right.
quality of the jokes.
But John Fierro, that's more of a trainer from like the early Tribune.
Yeah, I
era.
just remember that was a guy that Rosner. Things would be different if they still had John Fierro.
But this whole thing though, like really like an out of the blue talented team that they just mismanaged. It's late stage Tribune era. They didn't know what they had on their hands. Jim Hendry was, I think, borderline competent, but just like I said, towel drills and misdiagnosis and a revolving door of trainers and just like real frustrating. Like, they had any sort of organizational coherence with all the talent that they had, like between 03 and really 09, because there is some carryover between this team and Pinella's team. They could have really had a consistently good team, but instead it was this era, which 03-04, again, first time in our lifetime we had back-to-back 500 seasons. So it was actually the best period, technically, of Cubs baseball that we had seen up until this time. Yeah. And then, 07-08, there's just no consistency. Late stage Tribune era.
No. And it's funny because you got Hendry as the GM, the former farm director. So you figure there's prospects all over this team, right? So the guys that you normally had in your lineup, Michael Barrett was traded
for.
Derrek Lee was trade.
Mm-hmm.
Todd Walker was a free
agent.
Mark Grudzielanek was a trade.
Famously for Todd Hollandsworth.
Ramon Martinez was a free agent. That's who they listed shortstop because he played the most games because of Gonzalez's injury.
Wow.
Nomar was a trade. Alex Gonzalez was a
Alex Gonzalez was
that Scott Chiason? We'd love to say that name. I forget who.
Oh yeah, was that the Chiason? Because I somehow got Eric Hinsky mixed up. I just know that he came in after Ricky Gutierrez, but he was not homegrown for sure. He was on Blue Jay. Alex Gonzalez. Wow, you might have nailed the Scott Chiason.
No, I didn't. It's better. This is one of Hendry's best trades. Traded by the Blue Jays to the Cubs for a player named later and Felix Heredia.
What?
How do you turn Felix Heredia into something useful? They had to send Jim Deshane, not Jim Deshays, Jim Deshane, to complete the trade. Wow.
We actually got a slick.
Henry did make some pretty good trades. He really did.
A good one. I'm not going to fault that because you got a regular shortstop that had a lot of clutch home runs, and actually outside of Game 6 in 03 was a really slick glove man.
Moises was a free agent acquisition. Corey was a prospect.
Drafted by Ed Lynch in 95. Right. Might have actually been. Oh, I'm sorry. No. Drafted by Ed Lynch in 98. And that was definitely Hendry.
Sammy was a trade. Obviously, long ago inherited, but Sammy was a trade.
Right.
Jose Macias, I think, he hatched out of an egg somewhere.
Right.
Hollandsworth was a free agent.
Yeah.
Rocco they found at a bus stop. Neffy had been waived. Ray Ordonez was a free agent. Jason Dubois, because we know he played the last game, he was a prospect. Ben Grieve was a trade.
Yep.
Damian Jackson was a scrappy. Brendan Harris, the next Albert Pujols, was one of those.
That's a Henry. Yeah, Henry leveraged that.
Dave Kelton. Calvin Murray was a free agent signing. Right. Mike DeFelice was a waiver claim.
Right. Yes.
And then about pitching staff. Craig Maddox was a draft pick.
Not a Jim Hendry, though.
And was a free agent pickup. Carlos was there.
Carlos is a Henry pick.
Clement was a trade where they traded their own draft picks to get him. They traded Dontrell and the rest of the guys. Kerry was their pick. Pryor was their pick. But Hendry only picked.
And does Hendry get credit for
Pryor.
Wood in 95? He didn't really come along, I thought, until shortly after. So
he doesn't get credit for
Pryor, who fell into his lap, Patterson, who fell into his lap and sucked anyway, Brendan Harris, Francis Beltran.
The Farns.
I don't know. The Farns was probably a Hendry product. Yeah, I'd probably grant. I don't know exactly when Hendry came in. You're talking maybe 9 guys.
Yeah, because Farns was 94. Henry's at least in.
Oh, he was. No, that's that's pre McPhail. So that's not Henry.
So he doesn't get credit for Kyle either.
No. So 7 or 8 guys on a roster of like 40.
Yeah, they used 43 guys that year.
And if you're Jim Hendry, even if he didn't come in right in 95, he came in around 96, 97, I'm sure. So he's been there 8 years, and in all that time, he's only got about 8 guys. That's probably not that good.
Yeah, and then the division winners in 07 and 08.
Oh, God, that's all
very few draft picks on there.
That's all rotisserie. Oh, Like Ryan Theriot is not one you want to brag about.
Yeah.
And Gio Soto, I guess, was a rookie of the year. But, they that team was definitely a fan. That was when the Tribune finally relented because they wanted to blow up the value and let Henry spend. So, yeah, never. I mean, and he was like in his third full year, second full year as a GM here. I mean, it was a good team, like you said. I mean, look, everything in a vacuum. We're in our early 30s here, and we hadn't had back-to-back seasons in our life. I mean, it's the best we had. As pathetic as that sounds.
So the way you can compare it to the team we're going to do next is it was a hodgepodge of players from other teams mostly that could not sustain itself. It wasn't built to sustain itself. It was, hey, we're going to try to be good right now and see what we can win. Yep. And then neither team won, and it all fell apart.
Yep. It did, even though they got better.
It wasn't a young team getting better around itself. It was just a bunch of parts that were smashed together that you were constantly going to have to replace.
That's a good analogy. Like by not closing out the deal in 2003, they basically missed their window then. Although, God, they weren't that old in 2004. Like the 85, 86.
A lot of these guys stuck. I mean, Derrek was around for.
Yes,
Derrek and Aramis were cornerstones for a long time.
They were the two guys that carried over on the next back-to-back, 500 teams in 07.
When you think about how valuable is it to have, players that good at your corners.
Yes.
I mean, it makes building the rest of your offense pretty easy, and they still couldn't do it.
And that's with an offensive catcher. So, and Sosa and Wright, who was, Sammy was tailing off in 2004, obviously. He still put up pretty good numbers, I want to say.
Yeah, 35 homers and 80 RBIs. He only played 126 games because of the sneeze.
The sneeze in San Diego. But that's obviously serviceable. Even
Moises had a really good year. Moises 39 homers, 106 RBIs. He had 293, 361, 557. Aramis had a really good year. 36 homers, 103 RBIs, 318, 373, 578. Derrek had the slow start, but he ended up hitting 278, 356, 504. Walker hit 274, 352, 468. And then it's just like the 18 Cubs. Their numbers all look good, and down the stretch, they couldn't score any runs when they needed them.
Right. It was. I remember being at some games down the stretch and how agonizing it was. You're right. The offense on paper, 3, 4, 5, 6, goddamn, 7 of the – do I have that right? 7 of the 8 regular 8 players, or it has to be 6, have an OPS over 800.
Yeah.
Corey Patterson at 771 and Ramon at 659.
And yet they were 7th in the National League in runs scored. They were 4th in hits, 4th in doubles.
Interesting.
First in homers.
A lot of
stolen
shots.
Bases. But they were 14th in walks. So
Dusty hated walks.
Yep. They had a team on base of 328, and that was 11th in the National League.
Think of 11th out of back then, because it's even now. They used to be unbalanced, but whatever. It's pretty
15.
much at the bottom.
They had the same amount we got now.
Oh, you're right. 555, right? Because there's been no expansion since 98. So, 11th out of 15th for a team that won 89 games. Imagine how many more games they could have blown through had they just gotten more guys on base. I mean, maybe that would take away from what some of them did on offense. But
the pitching staff gave up the fewest hits in the National League, the second fewest runs. They had the most strikeouts, and the third best ERA.
Jesus Christ. The whole pitching staff.
And that's with Prior only making 21 starts and Wood only 22.
Oh, that's the thing that's ridiculous, is that the number 2 pitchers as far as innings or games is Zambrano and Maddox.
Yeah,
guys that were
the youngest and the oldest.
Right, 23-year-old and a 38-year-old. So, you got how many starts did you say that Wood had 22 so you get 1.5 seasons out of, not even that, like 1 1/3. Clement, that's why Glendon Rush was making starts that year.
Yeah, they combined to miss probably 32 starts. Basically, one trip around the rotation every time one of the two wasn't there.
Right. And it would be more of the same. It was again they dipped and came back in 07, but like 05 was a slog even before opening day. They weren't bad. This team was the 89 wins, and Dusty the next year, we mentioned this before, would strive to have a third consecutive 500 season. And I remember just hoping he didn't get it because it's not what he was signed up for. And then they went in the shitter in 06, then came back in 07. So it's really an odd era in general. If you look at the aughts, it was by far the most successful decade, from any 10-year period that begins in 0, let's say.
Yeah. Lou got 3 winning seasons in a row.
Yes. And then Theo finally broke through, and we actually had, heaven forfend, 5, which we've also since experienced. But imagine that, kids. 2004 is the first time some of us are in our 30s watching the Cubs our whole lives.
6.
And finally, what's that?
They had 6 winning seasons in a row.
6, right.
Although they only
played the Theo team, right?
Only played 60 games in the 6th year.
Doesn't matter because they were still over 519. See,
and they won the
2019 Cubs when Craig Kimbrell just shit the tub down the stretch. Very analogous to the 04 Cubs. At least is on the field. They weren't nearly as unlikable, but it was like this sort of painful, slow. This team's really good, and why can't we beat the Cardinals? Bullshit. But you're right. They were over 500 6 years in a row. Lou did it 3 years in a row, and Dusty did it 2 years in a row. And that's it. I'm not complaining. We won a World Series, but this is what we were dealing with by 2004 was that for the first time we've got a team that's finished 500 in back-to-back seasons. And yet it was a season that we just want to forget because it was a slog and then an absolute kick to the nuts the last 10 days.
Yep.
Last week, really.
Let's see here. I think it was just very comprehensive. I think we hit all the bums too.
I don't think we missed it. You're right. Because they didn't have a lot of pitchers. Maybe I'm comparing it to nowadays. But
he was 19.
That doesn't seem like a lot.
One of them was Andy Pratt, and he was only around for the first 4 days. So
yep. You have named everybody. I guarantee. So you didn't mention Shoulders Todd Wellemeyer. I thought he was going to pop up in one of those games. Yeah, my guy. He blocked me on Twitter.
Yeah, so they used a lot of shortstops. They had Alex Gonzalez, Nefi Perez, Ray Ordonez, and Nomar. And then Damian Jackson and his weird spider tattoos on his elbows. Do you remember those? Look like
no, I don't.
His elbows. He played. He only played 7 games. He hit 067. Mike DeFelice, I don't remember why he showed up, but he showed up at the very end of the season. I guess they just emergency. He had expanded rosters. Why not throw another catcher on there?
Sure.
Give Dusty some flexibility that he won't use. Calvin Murray, got to have him because he played for Dusty with the Giants.
He did, just like Tom Goodwin did the year before, I believe. Could be wrong.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way,
Goodwin
Mike
was still on this team for a little bit.
Right. You'll be happy to know that, 3 years prior to joining the Cubs, Mike DeFelice had been arrested on charges that he assaulted 2 women in a Pittsburgh nightclub. And after having done so, I thought that name rang a bell as like a guy that seems like a fucking shitty human.
Dirtbag, yeah.
Yeah, and so, yeah. I guess it's fitting that he was on the 2004 Cubs. Not saying they're all dirtbags, but very few of them comported themselves well outside of D. Lee and Ramirez. And
and Greg.
And Greggie, yeah. Everyone else can get fucked because they made lives so much more difficult for the rest of us.
So there it is. I defy anyone to do a more thorough analysis. Anyone to have the intestinal fortitude to do a more thorough analysis of the 2004 Chicago Cubs.
Yes. Now, excuse me while I slit my wrists.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Andy.
Many of us have herpes. want this to be over.